And there we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show of today's 2/20/11/02 A+ study group. Yes, it is the second of two. We had our 1101, our new 1101 series started on Tuesday, 2 days ago. And today is our first 1102 study group. And hopefully that will help you towards earning your A+ certification with the 220, 1101, and 1102 exams. Hello, chat room. Hello, everybody. We are in pretty good shape here. The internet has been relatively solid after a reboot of my primary router. I turned it off and turned it back on again, and everything works now. See, it's not just a punchline. It actually is a real troubleshooting task. And it worked for me. So we're in good shape. We've also recording down here. This is good. Everything looks good. But of course, now that I have what appears to be a relatively solid internet connection, rains are coming through as we speak. So who knows? We'll have to figure that out. This is always a good time, though. If we can keep this internet up and running, be in good shape. Hey, chat room. Hello, Malk from the islands. We've got Barcelona. We've got Houston, downtown Houston, to be specific, which is different than, well, I guess you kind of have to be specific with Houston because it is a big place. I don't know if you've ever been to Texas. They do everything kind of large there. So that's probably a good idea to specify. Hello, UK. More Texas. Lots of Texas checking in. Hey, Texas. Howdy. Good to have you here. Ohio is here, and Amsterdam, and Louisville, Kentucky, and DC is here. There's some Floridians checking in. We've got California. Lots of California, Maryland. People coming in from everywhere, even Canada. Where in Canada? We need to know. We need to know these things. I got kinfolk in Canada, as they say. So I always have to keep track of what's going on in Hamilton, what's going on in Edmonton, and what's going on, well, just outside of Vancouver. See, they're spread all over. From Toronto, good to have you here. Thanks for being here. Hello, Ghana and London and Miami and Maryland and Washington. Got a lot going on there. Okay, things look good here. I think we're ready to go. I don't know if I happen to have all of the things in my mind. I don't exactly remember the questions. I wrote the questions over the weekend. So by the time Thursday gets here, a lifetime of things have happened in the last 4 days. So who knows? It'll be something new for all of us. That's the good part. Okay. Things are okay. It's hard for me to see the internet from here. That 3%, for those of you that were here Tuesday and watched the numbers slowly get larger and larger, that 3% is what we're looking for. That is the cache. That is the amount of video and audio data that is being collected on my streaming device and sent to you. If that number increases, that means for some reason it's not able to send as much as it normally would. So I keep an eye on that number. And if it starts going up, I know strange things are afoot. So that keeps me in mind with what's going on. Hey, Tampa, more Texas. Lots of Texas. Grand Prairie, Texas. Syria, India. Cincinnati, Ohio. Indiana's here. New York City has checked in. Always good to have folks check it in. Thank you for being here. We'll get started in about 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Get these things going. I've got already a question up. You can kind of see it on my screen. The questions this first question is from last month. So if it looks familiar, that's what that's about. There's Utah, more Texas, Austin this time. South Africa is here. Welcome. Taking Core 2 tomorrow, RJ. All right, this is the final run. This is the final bit. Hopefully you've been using your exam objectives as a nice checklist. 5-minute warning. 5 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. Get this thing going. There's New York. There's Charlotte, Queen City. Good to have you here. There's, haven't been there in a while. I need to get back to Charlotte. I used to go quite often because did business there. Really, I covered, it was a part of my territory at the time was South Florida and South Carolina. I had the Souths. I had everything but South Dakota, I guess. So I would often, our office was in Charlotte, or just outside of Charlotte. So I'd fly into Charlotte and then just drive down to parts south from there, drive into South Carolina. Sometimes I would fly into Columbia or other places, but that was an odd territory split. To be living in South Florida, I don't live there now, but when I did live in South Florida was part of my territory in South Carolina. So you never know with these things. You never know when you get into this what this will ever turn out to be. I'm hearing the thunder. You can't hear it, but I'm hearing the thunder outside. It's like thunder. It's like lightning. Oh boy, that's a lot of. If you're looking there's a lot of red. Not a lot of red, but there's a lot of green and a lot of yellow. So we got. We'll see how this internet holds up. I'm sure it'll be fine. What could possibly go wrong? It'll be great. The problem is that there is lightning in that storm. So that's a. Do I have a favorite college football team? I don't. Just whoever's playing. I spend a lot of time creating content. So I'm in here a lot. I'm either writing a book, writing something for videos, shooting the videos, editing the videos, updating the website. I just wish I had time. Sports is one of those things that just got kind of cut out of my schedule. If I have time to watch anything, I usually pick something I know nothing about, and I watch that. But I usually don't have time to watch the sports ball. I enjoy it when I do. I used to go to lots of football and basketball games and enjoy it. I'm in Florida, so we don't really have hockey teams. Well, we do have hockey teams. We have some that have even won that. I was trying to think of something that would be an affront to describe the Stanley Cup. The Larry Cup. That's one of those where that was South Florida at the time. I guess the Lightning also. Didn't they win? Tampa Bay won as well. So both Florida teams have won the Larry Chalice. So and that's when I was living in South Florida. So it would be easy at that point. But everybody would take rats and throw them. It was just weirdness. It was back in a weird time, everybody. 2 minutes to go. 2 minutes. This is not the show. For those of you that have sent me letters and cards after this is over and you've tried to connect, you've tried to connect to the stream, you're like, well, it was just the back of his head. I don't know. It's because this is the pre-show. I'm just making sure I have everything running. We'll get started in about a minute and a half. Oh, we'll get there. Should be good. So that's why I just don't have much time for keeping track. Because I like to keep track of a team. I like to know who's on the team. I like to know who they're playing. I like to know where they are in the standings. The things that you watch sports for. That's what you do. It's kind of a hobby in that regard. But I just don't have time for that part of the hobby. So it just never becomes interesting enough for me to stay connected. It's just how it goes. That's okay. Hopefully that's okay with you, because that means I can create more of this content and keep everything going. And look at that. We're already getting the super chats. Brandon in the chat room with a $1.99 super chat. Thanks for the awesome videos. Past the 1,001. Congratulations. And now you've got kind of this 3-month window. You can lock in and get that 1,002 done if you haven't already. So I think your timing could not be better, Brandon. You are spot on with your timing. All right. It's time for me, speaking of timing, for me to figure out how to get this thing going. Got 15 seconds. Let's find a keynote. There it is. Let's get a green light. There it is. Nice. And all the video looks good. Audio sounds okay. The internet is up and running. So let's get a live stream going. Here we go with the study group, and away we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2022 Professor Messer 220-1102 study group. This is our A+ study group, a brand new edition, a brand new series of study groups that are specific to the 220-1102 A+ exam. We'll talk in a moment about what that means, why I'm even describing it that way, and what that might mean for you. And of course, in this first hour, I will be asking you questions that come directly from the 220-1102 exam objectives. And in the second hour, I'll open up the chat room. We'll take questions. So if you still have these lingering doubts about which exam do I take and how much time do we have and what's going on, we'll answer everything for you. You will be covered. No problem at all. Don't worry about a thing. We got your back. If you'd like to participate, if you are watching this live and you would like to participate, you can pop open a new browser window and browse to this URL, professormesser.com/QA. That is the site that will give you access to answer the questions, to lock in your answers. Of course, you need to lock it in on those pages. Please no answers in the chat room. We, of course, have an app you can also use. If you don't like going to an old website, that's such old technology, that web thing, we need an app. So there is an app called the Socrative Student app. It will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. So you've got a lot of options for answering questions. So if you are able to pop open a new browser window and go to that URL, or you go to the app, either one will work. It gives you exactly the same information. You will see a question there that I call my rewind question because it is a question from last month. So we'll see, well, how much you may have learned since last month, what you might have remembered from last month, but it's a way for us to know if you're able to get in and answer the questions that are in that Q&A. The question this month is, a server admin is building a series of scripts to run in Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be a shell script, PowerShell, batch file, Python, or VB script? If you think you know the answer, you go to the URL, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. If you're here live, please don't answer in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. If you're watching this on a replay, that link is not available to you. Nothing's happening at that link. You can visit it, but you'll notice there's nothing going on there. But you can still follow along. So on your own side of the screen, lock in your own answer and see if you can follow along with what we're doing. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Thank you for being here. We have one of these study groups for A+, really two study groups for A+ available each month. This is the one this month for the 220-1102, or what CompTIA calls the Core 2 exam. When we are not here live, you can certainly join us on the YouTube. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube to be able to see our latest videos. And of course, our entire 220-1102 course is now complete and available on YouTube for you to watch to your heart's content. So every bit of every video that I had planned to create for the 1101 and 1102 has now been shot, edited, produced, uploaded, and available to you, I'm happy to say. If you're not part of our YouTube channel, you might have not even known that. So feel free to stop by and subscribe, click the bell, do all those things that everyone always tells you to do when you visit a YouTube site. We've also got daily pop quiz questions for A+. You can visit those on professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram if you happen to enjoy your questions with a pretty picture. That's the whole point of Instagram, after all. There are two different series of A+ exams that you could take right now. So everybody who is listening to this live stream should take a moment and evaluate where they are with their studies and determine if they're studying the correct edition of these exams. One of these editions or versions, or I guess editions is a good way to put it, is the 220-1001 and 220-1002. Those are a series of exams that were introduced in January 15th of 2019. And you might be thinking, well, that sounds like it's about time to maybe update those. Well, you'd be absolutely right, because these will indeed completely retire and disappear from the market on October the 20th of this year. So if we sit here on the 14th of July, we got August, September, October. You got about 3 months and a day or two. So that's not a lot of time if you're starting new into this effort. If you are sitting down for the first time and trying to start your studies, there may be a better option for you. We'll talk about that in a moment. The exams that you would be taking would be 90 minutes long for each of these exams. On the 220 1001, you need a 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. On the 1002, you need a 700, a little bit more on a scale from 100 to 900. But the good part is, even though the exam is retired in October, 3 months from now, if you're able to pass both of those before the exam series is retired, you're certified for 3 years. So that's the real benefit, is you're able to take advantage of these years of knowledge on these exam objectives and be able to, if you have the time, put those into both of those exams and come out of this with a 3-year A+ certification. So that's always, always good to know. There is, of course, a newer edition, a newer series of these exams available, and this is the ones we'll be talking about today. If you were here Tuesday, we had questions from the 220 1101. Today, we're going to have questions from the 220 1102. This is a series of exams that were released on April the 20th of 2022, which means they're pretty fresh. They've only been out a few months now. The estimated retirement for these, therefore, would be somewhere around the November 2025 timeframe. That's so far into the future. At this point, it shouldn't be an issue, but if you are watching this on a replay and you're close to these timeframes for retirement, make sure you check in with the CompTIA website to know exactly when the exam will be retired. That is just an estimate. So once we get closer to the date, we will all know what a more accurate retirement might be. This exam is exactly the same in structure, format, time frame, questions, and everything else. So it's almost a mirror image of the older version, except they updated the content. So it's the same domains, it's the same domain structure, it's this almost everything is the same, but there are some things that are dramatically different between the two. So you want to be sure you study the correct version. You would not study 1101 if you're planning to take the 1001 and vice versa. So that's a big important thing to consider. You have to make sure you're taking both of the exams from the same series. You also can't mix and match. So you can't take one exam from one series and the other exam from another series. That won't work either. You have to decide both of these coming from exactly the same exam series. So that's pretty important. The structure on these exams, as I mentioned, is identical to the old version. In fact, the only thing I did on this slide was change this from a 220 1101 and 1001 and 1002 to 1101 and 1102, because everything else is exactly the same. So today we're going to have questions that come from these categories: operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, operational procedures, and starts with E. So those are the domains you will find in your CompTIA exam objectives. You might want to make sure you have a version of that available. If you would like an audio replay of this study group and any previous study group, they are all available on my website under professormesser.com/podcast. There are podcasts there for the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups that we do every month. You'll find plenty of those there. If you've never used a podcast listening app, they're amazing. They allow you to automatically download these things that you subscribe to. They will just automatically show up on your mobile device, and you can listen to them locally. You can also stream from that page as well, as you can see from that screenshot. We've also got a video replay of this live stream available immediately afterwards. It takes a couple of minutes to process, and then it's available. If you come back tomorrow or sometime about then, you'll see that timestamps have been added to the video in the YouTube video description. So make sure you check that out. That happens not magically or automatically. That's a manual process, thanks to my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. She's watching this on the replay, hopefully at 2 or 3 times speed. I haven't really talked to her about that, but she does an amazing job at finding out where these timestamps are, putting them in the YouTube video description so that you can now go back and find exactly what you want and need to find very, very, very quickly. So if you're someone who's taken advantage of that, make a note in the chat. She watches the chat replay going by as well. So please let her know how much you appreciate that. I know I sure do. This is something that we do once a month for a couple of hours. We have a number of different live streams we do, but we're always available on Discord when we're not here. We're usually hanging out on my Discord server. You can find it at professormesser.com/Discord. So if you'd like to have a chat or maybe study with other people, you can do that by going to professormesser.com/Discord. Also want to let you know that you're eventually going to need to pay to take these exams. So you'll need to purchase a voucher. You could certainly do that on the Pearson VUE website, but you'd be paying full price. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a discount available so that you could pay less for these vouchers and save a little bit of money? And there is. If you go to professormesser.com/vouchers, you will find that there are discounted vouchers already available. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need some special link. You don't have to have any referral code. It's just automatically discounted. Everybody gets the discount. You get the discount, you get the discount, and you get the discount. Everybody is discounted. Not only are you able to get these discounts if you are in the U.S., Canada, and some U.S. territories, but there are also bonuses if you purchase it from my site, specifically my Exam Hacks ebook that you cannot purchase any other way. You can get it bundled with my Success Bundle, or you can get it bundled with these vouchers. There's no way to purchase this Exam Hacks by itself. This includes a number of tips and tricks for studying and a number of strategies you can use during the exam to help increase your score. Maybe you'll get a couple of extra points from some of these tips that are in my Exam Hacks ebook. You can find out all of this and find out the discounts available at my website, professormesser.com/vouchers. I have to apologize for anybody who's not in the U.S., Canada, or some U.S. territories. Currently, those are the only countries that we support with this particular discount. Hopefully, we can do some more in the future. I think that would be fantastic. So let's go back to the question we asked earlier, which is, a server admin is building a series of scripts to run in Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be shell script, PowerShell, batch file, Python, VBScript? It's got to be one of those, right? Let's see what you chose. 56% of you say Python is what you would use. Here's an interesting almost three-way tie for second place, though. 16% for shell script, 13% for PowerShell, 12% for batch file, and only 3% said VBScript. Python definitely got the majority here, just over that number, 56%. And indeed, you would be right. Python is one of those scripting languages that, in a way, transcends the different operating systems that might be underneath. Python is one that you can use in almost any operating system. It has been created and built exactly to provide that, and it's made that particular scripting language very, very popular. It has made its foundation really in cloud management, and now we're finding we can use this for a lot more than just the cloud. And now between that and PowerShell, those are two very powerful scripting languages that allow you to do a lot. If you're someone who wants to learn more about automation, you want to be more valuable with your skill set, you want to find ways to make these skills work better for you, Python and PowerShell are two very good places to start. And indeed, that is the right answer. Python, 57% of you got that one absolutely right. Before we get into our performance-based question of the week, I want to thank it's your boy, Mirage, in the chat room with 15 euro super chat, who says, greetings, Professor Messer. Recently passed my university entrance exam. The questions were a mix of Network Plus, Security Plus, and EUCIP, which he says, or this person says, it is a EU version of CompTIA. Not sure that's entirely, well, it's probably a pretty good comparison, I think. Your videos were a massive help. Thank you, good sir. Congratulations on passing your university entrance exam. We don't have generally entrance exams in the U.S. There are certain standardized tests we have to take. Sometimes maybe that sort of fits the same model as the EU. But congratulations. It's amazing the value that these skills bring, and it will be this way throughout your career. You're always going to be connecting to a network. You're always going to be using an operating system. You're always going to need to keep these things secure. So having this knowledge in your back pocket, it can really help you quite a bit. And thank you for the 15 euro super chat. It's your boy, Mirage. I appreciate that. Also want to mention Alessandro with the 5 CHF. I need to know what that is. chat room. Tell me what a CHF is so I know what country we're talking about. Or Alessandro can tell me, who just says, keep going. Thanks. I will. And thank you for your support. And we've got a $2 super chat. You're amazing, Lori. It's Lori's first super chat. How about that, Lori? Have a coffee on me. Okay, Lori gets that extra $2 sent right into her paycheck just for that. I promise. So we will get Lori a coffee thanks to you. We appreciate that. Beef Dono in the chat room with the $2 super chat. We appreciate all of your support, by the way. For those of you, super chats aren't required, but boy, it sure does help keep the lights on. So we appreciate that help. Let's now do a kind of a different question. Some of you may not know. Oh, by the way, the CHF, Swiss franc, thank you for that. We appreciate you. If you start your A+ exam, the first questions you get on the exam will not be multiple choice. You know, the one we just talked about, we had a question and then we had choices that we could select, A, B, C, D, or E. You at least have a 20% chance of getting that question right, even if you didn't know the answer. Well, that's way too easy. 20% is way too high. So in the first handful of questions you get on your exam will be questions where there is no A, B, C, D, or E. You instead will be asked different kinds of questions. It might be a fill in the blank. It might be performing a function at a command line. It might be doing something on the Windows desktop. It could be a drag and drop question, a matching question. There's all kinds of different ways to ask questions. So anything that is not multiple choice, CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. And so the first question of the first new question of every study group, I like to have a performance-based question for you. This one is a matching question and is one hopefully you'll be able to match it perfectly because the number on the left equals the number on the right, which is something many of you have found I don't always do. This is a question that asks, match the description. There are 5 different topics and 5 different descriptions. The 5 different topics are FOSS, PCI DSS, PII, PHI, and EULA. And now we have 5 different descriptions. The first description A, a customer may make 1 backup copy of an application. Description B is all stored credit card information is encrypted. Description C, a company compiles their own executables. Description D, a list of medications is sent to a pharmacy. And description E, all customer email addresses are saved in a database. Those are the 5 descriptions. Now, if you think they are already in order, you can simply put in 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, 5E, and we're done. They are not in order. That's not much of a hint that they are not already in order. That would kind of defeat the purpose. So for those of you listening in the podcast, let me give you those 5 names, those 5 topics and 5 descriptions again. The 5 topics are FOSS, PCI DSS, PII, PHI, and EULA. The 5 different descriptions are: a customer may make 1 backup copy of an application. All stored credit card information is encrypted. A company compiles their own executables. A list of medications is sent to a pharmacy, and all customer email addresses are stored in a database. Those are the 5 descriptions. See if you can put those together. As always, follow that link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. That's where you want to put those in. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. I appreciate that. In the chat room, some folks are even asking, we talked about there's a 1001 and 1101. There's a 1002 and 1102. You know, what is that we need to work through? What are the different things along those lines? I guess I do need to provide you with a way to lock in your answer. There you go. What are the differences between these exam versions? So the big differences to me are that some topics are brand new. They obviously got rid of some topics. They brought in newer topics. Most of it is they've sort of peppered or updated minor topics within a subdomain. So for those of you familiar with the domains in the 220.1102, there's a domain 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's things like operating systems, security, operational procedures, troubleshooting. Those 4 domains have subdomains. So there's section 1.1, basic operating systems, or Microsoft Windows. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. Then there's section 1.2, section 1.3, and each section has a different set of things. Some of those subdomains have just been updated. Some things have been thrown out. Some things have been added too. Some of those subdomains are brand new. There's a subdomain for Active Directory now. So an entire section. This is one of those things that I think is very useful when these exams get updated, is you get a different perspective of what CompTIA and ostensibly the CompTIA partners and customers want to see on these exams. So you have newer exams that have Active Directory, detailed Active Directory functions. There's another subdomain, brand new. The entire subdomain is working on a help desk. And what do you do? And what does that look like? And what does help desk software feel like? And what is the process for taking someone's ticket? And what do you do with the information they're telling you? And what do you ask? Those are things that weren't on the exam before. So there are some significant differences. If you want to know what those are, I highly recommend that you go through and really work through what you see in the exam objectives as being different or the same. The exam objectives is always the best place to go. So I highly recommend that you do that, is go to the exam objectives. It's really going to help. And that will really be able, you can put those side by side and really see what the differences are. If you want a more detailed breakdown, we can always go through in the after show. You're welcome to ask in the after show. And I, of course, have a enormous spreadsheet that details everything that has been added that is new in the 1102. It doesn't detail things that were removed, but you get half the story anyway, to be able to work through that. Of course, you could always create your own example of what may have been removed. You can just refer to the exam objectives. Let's see how you did with this question. I see this is a tougher one than I think many people were ready for, because I'm seeing the answers come in very slowly. Stop Googling the answers. That's your first problem, is you can't Google during the exam. So no more Googling of the answers. This is also a question that I wrote. I write new questions every month. This is brand new. Google has never seen this question before, because it's one that I wrote brand new. So it's not going to be an easy one to Google anyway. So let's go through each one of these and figure out what we would put as the description for each one of these different topics. Let's start with FOSS, F-O-S-S. FOSS is free and open source software. And when you have the source code of the software that has been written, maybe the software was written in C++, and you have the source code itself, you could even edit that source code. You can look through the source code. You can examine all of the different modules in the C++ application. And then once you have all of the source code, you can compile the source code into the executable. So this is pretty useful if you are very sensitive to exactly what applications run on your computer and you want to be able to audit the application before it runs on your system. Think of how different that is if you buy a Microsoft Office and you install the executable version on your Windows machine. You're simply downloading an executable that's already been compiled. You don't have access to the source code. That's commercial software. And that's one of those good examples of how there is trust. All of IT and all of security in IT is based on trust. And that is a good example of how you must trust that this software coming from Microsoft is really legitimate and is not going to have something inside of that source code that is going to harm you. In 99.9999% of the time, that's absolutely true. As we have seen over the last couple of years, there have been cases where companies have been infiltrated and had malicious code put into their source code, which was then distributed by the company and effectively was able to gain access to, I don't know, U.S. government secrets, as it turns out. They're not talking about that very much, but those things do happen. So having access to the source code provides you with a number of advantages, security being one of those. And free and open source software, since you have the source, you can absolutely compile it, which is pretty nice. Next on our list, PCI DSS, the payment card industry DSS, the data standards that they have put together for your credit cards. So the PCI DSS in this case fits very well with the description of all stored credit card information is encrypted. These data standards from the payment card industry are not, they're not laws. They are They are contractual agreements that you have made with your credit card provider so that they know you're protecting the data from these credit cards. So that's one that if you are handing your credit card over to a retailer, that retailer must comply with the PCI DSS to be able to process that credit card. And if they don't, well, then we have bigger problems that we have to worry about. Next on our list is PII. PII, the personally identifiable information. And something that might be personally identifiable is your email address and your name and your social security number and your phone number and your zip code. These are things that can tie a bit of information back to you as an individual. So in this case, all customer email addresses saved in a database would absolutely qualify as personally identifiable information. That is another one of those acronyms you need to know for the exam. Make sure you're familiar with that one as well. Let's do another one on our list. Number 4 is PHI. It's only one letter different. And as it turns out, it's quite a dramatic change between the PII because this deals with medical information. When we deal with healthcare information, that personal healthcare information or private healthcare information for the PHI, it's things that deal with medical details, blood information, your x-rays, a list of medications sent to your pharmacy. There's a certain process for securing that information to ensure that it doesn't get in the hands of anyone else, that nobody else can gain access to your healthcare information. That is, those are rules and regulations that, of course, we commonly see here in the United States, but they are rules and regulations you often see worldwide. So this is a very common way to protect people, especially with their healthcare details. And lastly, EULA, E-U-L-A, which we use that abbreviation as a word. We call it EULA. And EULA, the only thing left on our list was answer A. A customer may make one backup copy of an application. A EULA is an end-user license agreement. This is the big wall of text that you get when you're installing a new program. And normally everybody just scrolls all the way to the bottom and they say, yeah, I agree. They don't even go into a lot of detail with this. Yeah, I agree with that. But there's a lot of information there that's very important because that is the agreement that you are saying, I will comply with everything listed in here on how this software may be used. And a good example of things that are in your EULA, if you go back and look at them, there's probably some information in there that says how you can handle backups of your original installation media, assuming that's one that comes with original installation media. And it may say that you're able to make one backup of the original installation media. You see that in a lot of older EULAs because they were so worried that you were going to burn a version and give it to a friend. And so legally, this protects the company that made the software so that if somebody does not comply with the EULA, they can hold you liable for that. And there, of course, we'll see you in civil court. Those are always fun, aren't they? This is the 5 different terms and descriptions we were looking for. As a summary again, FOSS is a company compiles their own executables. PCI DSS is all stored credit card information is encrypted. PII is all customer email addresses are saved in a database. PHI is a list of medications is sent to a pharmacy. And EULA is a company may make one backup copy of an application. Hopefully you got some of those right. This one was a little bit easier than one you might find on your actual exam because the number of topics and the number of descriptions was exactly the same. One of the things you may find on your exam is there are fewer or more descriptions and or topics, and so there will be some left over at the end. So that's one where you could get all of them wrong because there's so many choices to plug into this list. I made this one a little bit easier than most because of that. Hopefully you're familiar with those. If not, all of these topics are in your CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you refer to those and visit the video where these topics are described. They're across a number of different videos in the video series, so make sure you refer to that. This is a good set of topics for both the 1102 and the 1002. So if you are studying for that previous, and they're both current versions, but we'll call it the previous version, the 1002, those are things you should know as well. Let's move now to a multiple choice-based question. Here's a new question for you that asks, A Windows administrator needs to change the size of a paging file. Which of the following would provide this option? Would it be Device Manager, Internet Options, Users and Groups, System, or Sync Center? A Windows administrator needs to change the size of a paging file. Which of the following would provide this option? Is it Device Manager, Internet Options, Users and Groups, System, and Sync Center? I think this is one of those questions where people will send me notes afterwards and make fun of the way I say file. Sorry, folks, grew up in southern U.S. It's a page and file. It's page and file. Maybe I'm saying it too fast for the South. It's difficult to get the South out of you after being here for so long. So this is where I grew up. That's the way it works. If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen, professormester.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. So if you know how to find page and file, that's where you go right there. You can fit it right into that mix. This is a question. I guess this particular question has been customized specifically for the 2201102. So the answers here are specific to the new exam, not necessarily the old one, but it's very close to the old one. And you'll see why in just a moment. We'll talk a little bit about what those differences are. Really useful. And a question in the chat room, thanks for the help and efforts. Appreciate it. Would you consider having a PayPal donation account? I prefer to donate money directly to and only to you. I don't take donations. It's not something I like to do on my site. I just prefer not doing it. It's not the way I like to do it. But there are plenty of study materials on the site of many different prices. For example, if you want a set of course notes, you can go out there and get a set of course notes. Well, I prefer that you get something for your hard-earned money. So this is one of those examples that I have turned on the super chat and those things in the chat room, and it does come in handy, and we have some great conversations around those. But a number of people have said, I'd like to donate. Well, I don't take donations. So I appreciate that, though. I appreciate the thought, absolutely, that anyone would be nice enough to even consider donating money to this crazy experiment is so appreciated, and thank you. If nothing else, that motivates me by itself. But I just don't. I just prefer not doing it. So I don't. But I really do appreciate the thought. Let's go through this question, see how you did. The question is, a Windows administrator needs to change the size of a paging file. Which of the following would provide this option? Is it Device Manager, Internet Options, Users and Groups, System, or Sync Center? Let's see the results. 66% of you, 2/3, say it's System. I'll say it was 66.6. Say it's System. We have a two-way tie, maybe a three-way tie for second, between Internet Options at 13%, Users and Groups at 10%, and Device Manager at 8%. And lastly, down at 4%, a lowly 4%, is Sync Center. All of these are real things, by the way. They are all in this list and all available in this list to have these here. So you've got a few options. 64% of you said System. And in fact, for the 2201102, that is exactly where you would find this information. It would be under System for this. This is one that is different than maybe previous versions of the exam that did not refer to Windows 10 or Windows 11. But in Windows 10 and Windows 11, it is in the new System applet. I say it's new. It's been around for years now at this point. The part where you would change the virtual memory or the paging file, that is two of the same terms. It's two terms that mean the same thing, is also in here. There's an option in this view for the advanced system settings, and that's exactly where you would make that happen. If you were to click into that, you would see a number of performance settings where it would bring up the system properties. See, they updated. Let's back up real quick. So they updated the system front end to give you kind of a more consolidated view of how to access these important system functions. And a number of these are integrated into this new user interface in Windows 10 and Windows 11. However, there are some other parts of the operating system that are not integrated into that new UI that are instead using the older user interface. And so you'll click the advanced properties and then it brings up the old I say the old, it's the one that's been around forever, the traditional system properties dialog box. So you can see that that's what you would find in Windows 7, Windows, maybe even before Windows 7. We can go back a number of versions where you had some flavor of the system properties available. Underneath the system properties, there's an option for performance, which as you see includes virtual memory. If you click settings, this middle box pops up. Inside the middle box, you have an option to modify virtual memory, and the default, a very good default by the way, is to set it just to automatically do it, and it will figure it out on its own. But there might be times when you prefer having really control of the virtual memory in your system. So you could say, do not automatically manage this. I will determine how much space I would like to use, and then you can lock that in. So that is available in all versions of Windows. You have complete control over that, but that whole process started back on the system screen, right there under System. So you have a number of options under System. You can see all the different options on the left side are also available. It is really a nice user interface in Windows 10 and Windows 11. I like what they're doing with the user interface, but as you can imagine, Windows is a very large ship. And if you've ever been at the helm of a very large ship, it's very difficult to turn that ship in any quick amount of time. It takes a while once you start turning the wheel to finally get everything turned and you're moving in a different direction again. So that tends to be the issue with Windows and latest version is they've moved some things over into the new UI, but we still have more of the ship that needs to be turned. So they're working on that. When we get to Windows 11.1, I don't know, Windows 12, whatever it happens to be the next one, maybe there will be even more of this that has been integrated into this new UI. What are the limits with expanding virtual memory? Virtual memory, of course, is memory that it's a section of your storage drive that you use to swap out things from actual RAM temporarily. And then once you need that information again in memory, it's moved off of your storage device and back to memory. So the size of your virtual memory could effectively be the same amount of available space on your storage drive. You, of course, would not want to use all of your storage space on your drive for that. In fact, you probably won't even be using all of the virtual memory in the default configuration. But if you're using applications where you have a lot of things loaded at one time and you're starting another application, there may be things behind the scenes in the background that you're not using that might get paged out into that virtual memory. So in a way, it makes your system feel like you've got more actual RAM than you really do. The disadvantage, of course, is that it takes time to copy things out of memory, put them on a storage drive, and then, of course, pull them back off the storage drive and put them back into memory. RAM is very, very, very fast. Your storage drives, by comparison, are very, 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 very slow, relatively speaking. So it's not something you like to do. That's why we often tell you, get as much memory as you can afford to put into these systems so that you never have to use your virtual memory. But when you need the virtual memory, it sure comes in handy. So make sure you know where those settings are. This obviously is in my 220.1102 series, section 1.4, under the video, the Windows control panel. So M.2 would help with the speed, but again, storage drives are much, 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 much slower than actual RAM communication to the CPU. It is remarkable. We should really put up a chart that shows the differences in access speeds between accessing something in RAM and accessing something on a storage drive. Dramatic, huge, monster differences. If at all possible, you should never use virtual memory. You should have enough actual RAM to be able to have everything in your system memory if performance is important to you. But there are times when you just run out of physical memory. Having those virtual memory areas can keep your system up and running, allow you to run more applications at the same time, or at least run certain applications while others may be swapped out to that virtual memory. Very, very useful. Let's do another question. Here's another one that I have since we're talking Windows. Here's another one that says, a user has encrypted a single folder on an NTFS volume. Which of the following would best describe this encryption? Would it be BitLocker, VPN, WPA2, HTTPS, or EFS? A user has encrypted a single folder on an NTFS volume. Which of the following would best describe this encryption? Is it BitLocker, VPN, WPA2, HTTPS, or EFS. If you think you know the answer, follow the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. I don't know if I really have to keep saying don't put any answers in the chat room. The chat's been really good about that so far. Yes, you have to, once you lock in your answer, it's really locked in, isn't it? RJ says, I click submit. No, I picked the wrong one. So that's okay. Well, this is the time, if you're going to answer something wrong, this is when you need to do it. Get all your wrong answers out of the way today so that when you sit down for the exam, there's no place for wrong answers. That's what you need to do. This is the time where we really need to not only understand which answers are right and why they are right, but also which answers are wrong and why they are wrong. So we will, of course, go through all of those today. You might not have a question about NTFS and whatever this answer is. It might be a question about something else. So we will step through all of these just so you're familiar. Does it matter much if I already passed the 1001? Should I take the new tests instead? You should absolutely not take the new tests instead. If you've already passed your 1001, the only way you will be A+ certified is if you pass your 1002. And you must do that before October the 20th. You have 3 months, Andrew. This is the time. For anyone else who's working on their 1000 series exams, the time for fooling around, we've fooled around long enough. The time for delays, the time for I'll get to it, the time for waiting until maybe I have a free moment, those days are over. It is now straight ahead as fast as you can. You have 3 months to finish your 1000 series. I cannot emphasize strongly enough how important it is to hit the books, hit the videos, hit the labs, hit the Q&A, and get this thing done in the next 3 months. Otherwise, Andrew, you will have to go all the way back to the beginning. Once October 20th hits, and let's say you don't pass the 1002, which of course will not happen with you because you're going to pass the 1002, but somebody else, maybe they passed the 1001 and then they just ran out of time, everything gets wiped. Now you have to start all the way over again, and you would have to take and pass the 1101 and 1102. So that's why I emphasize and so make sure everyone is aware of these dates. That retirement date is an important one. And I would hate for somebody to make such an investment in their time and their money and their resources, pass one of these exams, and then not take the other one. That's crushing to me. That makes me sad just thinking about it. So if you pass the 1001, should you wait to take the 1002? No. The 1002 you need to pass before October the 20th. Now I think you're just messing with me. Now I think, and no refunds. That's correct. When you buy these vouchers and you lock it in, that's it. You've paid for it. You got to buy it. You got to use it. It needs to get there. It's pretty important. So another one of those things to think about. Let's look at this question. This question here, we can talk more about that in the after show if you'd like. And I'm more than happy to answer those questions in the after show. The question here was, a user has encrypted a single folder on an NTFS volume. Which of the following would best describe this encryption? Would it be BitLocker, VPN, WPA2, HTTPS, or EFS? Let's see what you think the answer is. 58% of you say EFS. 34% of you say BitLocker. So we've got a bit of a give and take there, although 58% is pretty strong. We have 5% that say WPA2. We've got 1% that says VPN and 2% that say HTTPS. So those two are kind of tied for last place in that scenario. The real key for this question is the encryption scenario. It's this first sentence that says a user has encrypted a single folder on an NTFS volume. This is not completely obvious, but it certainly assumes here that the other folders on this NTFS volume are not encrypted. They are in the clear, as we like to say. So we have a single folder that is encrypted and everything else is not encrypted. What technology would be used for something like that? Well, 59% of you say it's EFS, and you would be right. It is the encrypting file system. This is a feature that is built into NTFS. The new technology file system, NT, back in the Windows NT days is where this name came from, although NTFS has changed constantly through the years. This is not the same NTFS we had with Windows NT. This is a modern version of NTFS that has been updated many, many, many times throughout the years. And it is a very capable and very advanced type of file system that has built into it not just amazing amounts of control and permissions that you can assign, but it also includes the ability to encrypt data as part of the file system. And you don't have to create your own certificates. You don't have to come up with some other special application that does the encryption. You don't have to remember any other passphrases or passwords. It is very slick. You just say, yeah, I want to encrypt it. In fact, that's the link that's here. There's a click box right at the bottom of the attributes. You go into the properties of a file or a folder, and one of those attributes, if you're running NTFS, is to encrypt contents to secure data. And that's how complicated it is. You go, oh, yeah, click, boom, now it's encrypted. That was it. That's all you had to do. So that's what you would use if you wanted to encrypt data. It's built into NTFS, so every Windows edition except for the Home Edition. I guess they assume if it's a Home Edition that you don't need security for some reason. It's an odd thing to leave out, isn't it? Everybody needs to have encryption. So unfortunately, you would need to upgrade to a higher level edition to support EFS. There are some workarounds, and I know you've sent me the emails. I know there's ways to work around a number of these features, but Microsoft won't support it. So there is some importance to that and keeping that. The way that this works is it uses your login authentication as the method, as the key that's used for the encryption method. So you don't have to remember another passphrase. You don't have to have a separate certificate. It just uses your username and password to be able to do that. The problem you might have with that is there are ways to go into Windows and on the back end change in the security files the login information for a user. In other words, you're not going through the normal front end in users or groups or an Active Directory to change a password. You're kind of working through the back part of the operating system to do that, which you, to be fair, you would rarely do that. But if you do that, you're that hacker kind of person who gets in there and finds a way to reset that password without going through the normal channels, you will most likely lose access to all of this encrypted data because now the username and password is different than the one that was used to actually encrypt it. See how that works? So that's an important consideration. Also, good question in the chat room. Andrew asks, so EFS, does this now slow down the drive's performance, the operating system performance? Does it slow down anything? Well, obviously, there is an overhead associated with encrypting and decrypting data. That overhead will be based on a number of different things: your speed of your storage drive, the speed of your CPU, the bus that's inside of your computer. Of course, all of the things that normally would affect the ability of this to operate. But on most of our modern devices, with the types of files that we are encrypting and the fact that it's built into the operating system itself, it's imperceivable for most people. I would say the vast majority of people have even no idea that it's there. Imagine something that is even a larger scale. Let's go back to our list of things. The one that 33% of you chose was BitLocker. BitLocker is a full disk encryption, or FDE. You'll sometimes see that abbreviated. Full disk encryption encrypts everything on a volume. It encrypts the operating system. It encrypts all of your files. It encrypts all of your applications. It encrypts everything. The benefit of BitLocker, and if you're on a mobile device like a laptop, hopefully you're running BitLocker, is that if you lose the laptop, if somebody breaks into your car and steals your laptop, if your laptop gets left behind somewhere and somebody gains physical access to your storage drive, they would not have any access to the data on that storage drive because it's all encrypted. So that's why BitLocker is so valuable for those mobile devices. But it's also very different than just encrypting a single folder like we did with EFS. But imagine every file on your operating system, the operating system itself. Imagine if everything was encrypted. That's what BitLocker does. So I'll even take the question that Andrew asked earlier. Well, does that slow down the system? There's obviously overhead associated with the process of decrypting all of the data so that you can bring it into memory and use it. That overhead, though, on our modern computers, nearly imperceivable, if completely imperceivable. It's not something you would notice at all. And even if you did notice a little bit of a slowdown, that's your trade-off. Your trade-off is between security and a maximum speed. But if speed was something that was super critical to you, if you had a particular application or function where speed and time and CPU was of the essence, and there are some very specific industry corner cases where those are extremely important, you may not want to use EFS. You may not want to use BitLocker because there is a little bit of overhead that takes place. But for the vast majority of us, and I would say if you work for any company, every single one of your laptops is configured with BitLocker. If it isn't, you're doing your end users and your company a disservice. Everything that goes out that is mobile should have full disk encryption on it. Everything. And it's so easy to use. It's so seamless. It works so well. Why wouldn't you use this to protect your data? Now, people steal laptops, and I think people have the idea that people are stealing laptops because the laptops have value. But in reality, it's the data on the laptops that is much more valuable than the laptop itself. Probably many multiple times more valuable than the laptop itself. In some cases, depending on the type of data on your storage device, it could be tens, hundreds, or even thousands of times more valuable than the laptop hardware itself. So BitLocker, although a very valuable security tool, does not fit into somebody encrypting a single folder on an NTFS volume, but you would absolutely want to consider using that if you have a mobile device. Other options here are WPA2. 6% of you chose WPA2. WPA2, obviously, is the encryption that is used on wireless networks. It's one of the options you have for encryption on wireless networks. Wireless networking should always be encrypted if you ever possibly can. And certainly in your workplace, you're probably running WPA2, or maybe in some cases WPA3, the newer version. WPA2 is probably enabled on all of your corporate wireless networks and your home networks. And if it isn't, you should go do that right now. In fact, don't even watch this anymore. Go turn on your wireless encryption right now. That's how important that is. But WPA2 and the wireless encryption that is so important does not do anything with encrypting single folders on an NTFS volume. We also have options here for HTTPS. That is your Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. That is the encrypted communication that is used in your browser to communicate to a web server. If you go to professormesser.com, then you know that everything is coming up as an encrypted file. Everything on my site is encrypted. You don't have a choice. It's just always encrypted. And so you'll notice it's always communicating via HTTPS. That is for web server, primarily web server communication over this encrypted channel. That has nothing to do with encrypting a single folder on an NTFS volume, of course. In fact, if you go to professormesser.com, there is no NTFS volume. It's running Linux. So that's a good example of how HTTPS is more about the protocols and traffic we're sending over the network and not something that's being stored on a volume. And lastly, VPN. And it's good that only 1% of us chose that one. We're all pretty familiar with virtual private networks, especially these days after so much work from home that we've done over the last couple of years. VPNs are great for providing an encrypted and private tunnel between one site and another, one device and another, but they don't encrypt single folders on NTFS volumes. That's not what a VPN does. A VPN is encrypting data being sent across a network. And so it's only right that only 1% of you would have chosen that one. The best answer, EFS. It's the one that 59% of you chose. It's the one that is absolutely right. And that is the one that hopefully you were able to choose. If not, you'll know it next time. You'll know it if it pops up on the exam, and that is the real benefit. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, you want to follow these instructions to be able to receive an email from me that has been digitally signed that certifies that you are here to watch 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. You would go to the top or bottom of the Professor Messer website. You would click the Contact Us link. You must follow this process to earn the email. Click the Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put July 2022 Core 2 Study Group. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month. What should we use? Let's use BitLocker. BitLocker is the super secret code word of the month. Put that in and send that message away to me. It takes me about a week or so to process these, although I did a couple of live streams this week, so maybe I can get this done this weekend and get these turned around for you. I can get these messages back to you. Keep checking your inbox for the digitally signed message from me, as long as you follow those instructions. Again, which were, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, put in the subject line, put something that I can recognize from what study group this came from, like July 2022 Core 2 Study Group. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, BitLocker. BitLocker is super secret code word of the month. I've talked a lot in the study group, haven't I? We will come back to other parts of this in just a moment. And I'll make sure we get in at least another, I know we're at the top of the hour, we'll get in at least another question as we go through this. Would I recommend EFS over something like verascript? I personally not used verascript, but I like the idea of using capabilities that are integrated into the operating system and not using third-party software, especially when it comes to encryption. What's in verascript? Who wrote verascript? Do I have access to the source code? If I encrypt this data, who else would have access to this encrypted data? And how would I even know if this is software that's provided to me that's already been compiled? So there's some challenges when using third-party software. Again, all security is based on trust. That's a good example of that. Matthew in the chat room with the $5 super chat, who says, passed my Network Plus and Security Plus because of your videos and notes. Thank you. Congratulations on passing Network Plus and Security Plus. If you're here, are you working on the A Plus next? You probably did it like I did. I did Security Plus first, then Network Plus, and then I got my A Plus. I did it backwards. Don't be like me. Don't do it backwards. Do it the right. Well, I guess you could do it backwards if it made sense. And for me, it did make sense. Thank you, Matthew, for the $5 super chat. Thank you for your support, and congratulations for your Network Plus and Security Plus. This is there's a lot here, as you can already tell. We are in the sort of the end of a first hour, and we've already talked about so many different technologies. And that's one of the challenges of the A Plus exam, is that there's a lot of things you have to know. If you look at my new 2 courses, I have the 220-1101 course and the 220-1102 course. They are both complete and available on YouTube. You can watch them at any time. 19 hours of videos, 137 videos, and I feel every single one of them. We have been churning through these for the last month. Been doing nothing but sitting in front of the camera and talking, or sitting in front of the computer and editing. So it's first, I got to tell you, I love the new course. I say this every time we finish a course, but it's the best A Plus course we've ever done. That's how much I like it. And of course, that's what I want to do every time I come out with a new course, is always continue to make them better and better and better and better. And hopefully you'll see that. But one of the challenges is there's a lot of content here. 137 videos, 19 hours, and information on hardware and security and networking and operating systems and encryption and troubleshooting, and it goes on and on. How could you get all of that information consolidated into one single view? And you can do that with my course notes. This is the PDF version of my course notes. Let me flip ahead a little bit. So you can see that it's in the same order as the videos. It contains all of the same text from the videos. I put in all of the important charts and graphics and details and text and anything else that might help you on your studies with your A Plus certification. There are, of course, these are available, of course, for both the 1001 and the 1002. So you've got options here if you wanted course notes. There's the ones for the 1002. The physical version of the course notes is identical to the digital version. So you're getting the same information. It's just in a different format in this nice perfect bound paperback book. Glossy, full color glossy on the front. You've got full color on the inside. We're not messed around. This is high quality stuff, folks. I wouldn't do it any other way. And if you purchase the physical version, you get the digital version included for no additional cost. So you can start reading it before the version comes in, the physical version comes into your mailbox. So that gives you some options if you're somebody who's working towards this. And for those of you looking for a way to support what we're doing here, every penny goes back into creating more of this and what we're doing. So this is a way to keep this crazy experiment going. And so far it's working great. You guys have been amazing at supporting this through our course notes, our practice exams, the other things that we have on our website. We sure appreciate your support, and thank you for that. Hopefully you found the information in the course notes to be valuable, and based on your emails and the messages that I get, you seem to really, really like it, so we're glad to bring it to you. Find out more about that at my website, professormesser.com/1102 notes. I almost got the name wrong. Although if you're taking the 1002, there are also 1002 course notes available. So pick the one, and that's an important consideration. Right there at the top, let me bring my big head back into this. Right there at the top, 220-1102. Make sure the version of course notes that you're using matches the version of the exam that you're planning to take. Make sure, not just the course notes, but any study materials you're using, make sure all of your study materials match the version of the exam that you're planning to take. That's pretty important. So be familiar with what options you might have available, and make sure you use the right study materials for your exam. Yes, that 137 videos is for both cores. One of them is 68 videos, the other 69 videos. There's just tons and tons of videos that we did. And I thank you, John, the chat room. I think they're the best course notes ever as well. I get better with making them every time, so I like them. And thank you for your support of them and your purchase of them. It does go a long way. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's do another question, though, because I've been just talking so much. Here is this question that asks, a troubleshooting question. A system administrator would like to boot from a USB drive, but the system bypasses the USB drive when starting. Which of the following would resolve this issue? Now, that's not the same one, isn't it? I've got a different set of questions on my screen than you're saying. This is not unusual, by the way, in my world. Let's see if I can find the right question in mine. There it is. Now you can see it properly. A technician is troubleshooting a problem on a Windows computer. Which of the following would provide the technician with the time since the last restart? See how that works? It's all live, people. It happens. The possible options are Task Manager, Services, SFC, Reg Edit, or Time and Language. This question again. A technician is troubleshooting a problem on a Windows computer. Which of the following would provide the technician with the time since the last restart? Would it be Task Manager, Services, SFC, Reg Edit, or Time and Language? So what would it be? I'm glad we shifted to this question because I kind of like this one better. There are many times. Well, I don't want to give anything away. So we'll talk more about stories. We'll have story time right after this of where this question came from, how this question showed up, why this question is important, not just to me, but why this question is important to you, perhaps more importantly. So we'll go through all of this. See if you can lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you'll be able to lock in that particular question. This is one we really did update for the new exam. It's one of those that I think, I'm not going to say anything else. I want to give you some hints. I'm dying to give you hints on this, but I don't want to give you any hints. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll figure out what it is once we get into it. Yeah, there's no lightning round. We don't do that here. It's $5 for every correct question. No, there's no lightning round. We'll put you in the tunnel and you have to collect all the spinning money. We don't do that. So it's not the way it works. We'll be able to figure it out. The chat room, Noah asks, would making videos for the CCNA, the Cisco Certified Network Administrator, be a possibility for you in the future? Well, anything's a possibility, Noah. So what you're saying is there's a chance. That is what I'm saying. There is a chance. I don't know what that chance is, though, at the moment. I do not have a definitive answer on what new course, if any, will be coming in the future. That is quite the tease. There's just nothing valuable that I was able to say about that. It's non-committal, but that's sort of where we are. I'm still in the middle of finishing up the A+ content at this point. As soon as we get past the A+ content, then I can take a breath and figure out what is the next one? Where do we go from there? So that's why I mentioned that, and being able to work through it. I just don't know. I will tell you, I'd love to do some CCNA content. That would be great. It's right in my wheelhouse. It's something that would be fun to do. It's a valuable certification. I mean, there's a lot of advantages there. There's a number of disadvantages as well. So these are, by the way, for those of you that have been in my head and have heard these voices before, you know that this tends to change. Every day I tend to think, oh, the next one's going to be this, or the next one's going to be that. It's constantly ping-ponging back and forth. It's constantly changing. So one day I'll wake up in the morning and go, you know, we're absolutely going to do CCNA. And the next morning I'll wake up and say, you know what, we're absolutely going to do an AWS cert. And the next day I'll wake up and go, you know what, Microsoft is where it's at. So don't look at me for trying to figure that out. I am the worst person to be able to figure that out. And you're right, Uncle Phil's Fudge is the bomb. We need to give him more credit in the live stream at UnclePhil'sFudge.com. Get those flavors of Florida at Uncle Phil. I don't know what his taglines are. I'm just making them up. The Taste of Florida at UnclePhil'sFudge.com. Uncle Phil, for those of you that have been on the live stream, Uncle Phil's Fudge, Uncle Phil at UnclePhil'sFudge.com is Professor Messer's brother. So that's why we often talk about Uncle Phil's Fudge. I get to have it for free. I'm not bragging anything. I'm not just saying. He just brings it by and drops it out. It's fantastic. I get to do the ones that he's testing. So I got to test the key lime pie fudge. I got to test the vegan fudge. He has vegan fudge. You can't find a lot of vegan fudge out there. He did it. I don't know. He's a magician. Let's see how you did with this question. Technician is troubleshooting a problem on a Windows computer. Which of the following would provide the technician with the time since the last restart? Would it be Task Manager, Services, SFC, Reg Edit, or Time and Language? Let's see what you chose. Click Show Results. 56% of you say it's Task Manager. 20% of you say it is Services. And then we have, look at that three-way tie for third. 8%, 8%, and 8% say SFC, Reg Edit, and Time and Language. So where would we find? By the way, this is, if you are wondering, there is an aspect of troubleshooting that, if you've gone through the CompTIA, you know this. There's an aspect of troubleshooting that asks you as the technician to ask a lot of questions about the problem that the user is having. When did you first see this problem? Were there any error messages on the screen? Did you reboot your computer, and what was the result? Did you and the answer to that, oh yeah, I rebooted. Oh yeah. I absolutely rebooted and it's still doing it. I don't know what's going on. And then you visit the customer. You go, okay, I'll be there. I'll drive over. I'll go up to that floor. I'll go to that building. We'll see what's going on, or I'll remote desktop into your system. We'll see what's happening on the computer. And the first place that you would probably go to see how long has the system been running would be the Task Manager. And I've got a copy of what you might see on this Task Manager. This is for a troubleshooting process for rebooting. I mentioned in the pre-show that just before I started the live stream, I rebooted my router because I was getting download speeds of 8 megabits per second. I rebooted my router and it went up to 500 megabits per second. So I rebooted it and suddenly everything was working. It's remarkable how often a reboot will get everything working. And that's why we often tell people, did you reboot and what was the result? The problem is once you bring that up and have a look at it, you can see right at the bottom is an uptime value that is in Task Manager. And you might be going to Task Manager to actually look at the tasks that are running in the system, but you might want to flip over to the Performance tab and have a look at the very bottom where it says uptime, just to see how long it has been since somebody rebooted. And if it shows that they haven't rebooted in over 24 hours, and yet they've got this this system, and they told you, no, I totally rebooted. By the way, this is complicated a bit by the new quick shutdown, quick restart feature of Windows 10 and Windows 11, because doing a shutdown on a system does not necessarily shut it all the way down. It simply puts it into a hibernate mode by default. And when you push power to get back on, Windows suddenly is right there again. That's because it just loaded everything from its hibernate files. So that's why people think they're shutting down, but in reality, they're not really rebooting. They're not really shutting down completely. They're sort of putting it to sleep, and then simply starting it back up to where they left off. And that's why in a lot of companies, they will disable that fast startup feature so that when somebody shuts down, it really shuts it down. Primarily for that very reason. Being able to restart a machine can be very, very useful. I was noticing this at 3:30 in the morning this morning. This is how important that is. At 3:30 in the morning, every 3:30 in the morning, every cable television box that I own reboots. Not because there's a glitch, because that's the standard operating procedure for my cable company, is they reboot everybody's cable box every night or every morning at 3:30. So why was I up at 3:30? That's a very long story, and we're not even going to talk about that. But that is one where think of the number of phone calls they don't get because they force these systems to restart every morning at 3:30. Let's put this in more of a context for the A+. I worked with a customer. It was an entertainment company. They had a very large data center, relatively large data center, where they had a number of web servers that were providing access to their company services. And they were on a load balancer. So they had, I think, 8 different servers. They were Windows servers on a load balancer. But some of the software that they were using on their web servers had a memory leak. And so the memory leak would eventually eat away at the memory and eat away at the memory and eventually cause the operating system to crash. So what they did was set up all 8 of those servers so that every hour, one of those servers rebooted. And it just went around all 8 of them, one after the other. So every hour, one of those boxes was rebooting. But it didn't cause any downtime because it was on a load balancer. The load balancer recognized, oh, that machine's not there anymore. We simply won't send it any requests. And they were able to keep their entire system running 24/7, no interruption to the end user. Services were always available regardless of the time of day because they simply rebooted the system at least once a day, sometimes more than that. So that's a really good example of rebooting a computer. It doesn't fix the problem, but it may fix the symptom enough to effectively resolve the issue for you. And that is one of those really good examples where they didn't have access to the code. They couldn't fix the memory leak that was inherent in that particular version of software they were using. The fix was not available to them to fix the memory leak, so they fixed the symptom of the memory leak. So that's just a beautiful thing. Just a beautiful thing when that happens. And indeed, that's why I think IT Crowd, Dante's Inferno with the €2 super chat. Thank you for the nice reference to IT Crowd. That is exactly where that particular bit of fiction meets reality, is that have you turned it off and back on again? It should just be on. I love that they used a reel-to-reel tape with the telephone to actually play have you turned it off and back on again. It's just brilliant. That in itself is brilliant. There's so many lines in that me and Mrs. Professor Messer will sometimes say to each other because it just hits home every time for doing those. So in this case, finding that uptime value is exactly where you'd find it. Task Manager is where that is. 58% of you did choose Task Manager, option A. It's not in services. Services are obviously those applications that run in your operating system that are all behind the scenes. In fact, they don't have a user interface. Services don't have a screen that you go to configure them. They simply run on the back end. If there's any user interface to a service, it's usually in a configuration creation that is used separate to the service that writes the configuration options, and then you start the service and it uses those. The only way you would be able to control that service is through the services app or control panel app or applet, if you will. That services applet is very useful, allows you to restart, stop, administratively control, set different permissions. There's lots of options inside of services, but it does not tell you anything about when a system may have been last restarted. So you won't find that inside of services. You also won't find that under time and language. Seems like that's where it would be. I need how long it has been. Certainly would be under time and language. It is not. Time and language is where you would configure your operating system to the time settings, the time zone, and any language settings specific to your particular computer. It does not tell you anything about how long the system may have been running or may have been rebooted. We also at 8% have SFC, the system file checker. SFC is a fantastic utility for examining the core operating system files and making sure that none of those files have been changed. The SFC utility, we sometimes refer to it too much in our industry. We say, oh, you're troubleshooting a random problem and we know nothing about this problem and we haven't asked you any questions about it. Have you run SFC? It's sometimes we tend to jump on that because we think that should be where we start. But in reality, you probably not want to run an SFC unless the symptoms you're seeing really are indicative of an operating system gone awry. Normally, you see that associated when somebody has maybe cleaned some malware or cleared malware from a system and would like to verify the operating system really has the correct files before going in and recovering data before you image it. And of course, you're going to image it or delete everything because it had malware on it. So SFC is great for finding those operating system files that may have been changed, and it will update those and fix them if it finds any that are not correct. And lastly, regedit, the registry editor. The registry is that primary database that is used for Windows as an operating system and for applications to be able to store, retrieve, and save configuration data primarily. The registry can be edited, can be changed, updated, backed up, or modified using the regedit application or the registry editor application. So it's pretty useful to have those. I think if you're at any point going to be doing any type of administration on a system, you will eventually be using a lot of regedit. And you'll see there are many Microsoft configuration settings and troubleshooting tasks and knowledge base articles that will tell you, yeah, what you can do is simply go into regedit, change this particular section of the registry, delete this particular area, back up this hive. A section of the registry is called a hive, like a beehive. And so the registry allows you access to those. To that end, just so you're aware, you could tear up your system pretty well by modifying, changing, or updating the wrong thing in a registry. We've all done this. I did a pretty bad one on one of my systems where I accidentally deleted a major key, the major section of a registry, sort of deleted everything that defined, well, everything about the operating system. And it caused the entire operating system to crash and would not restart, and ended up having to do a recovery installation to rebuild the registry and fix my problem. And of course, did I have a backup? No. Do I always tell you to have a backup? I do. Do I emphasize how important backups are? I do. Did I have a backup? I did not. It's stories like that, though. This is nothing recent. This was a long time ago. So those are the types of stories that make me so passionate about telling you about how important having a registry happens to be. So I think that's another one of those. Make sure you are familiar with that. You don't want to be in that position where working with the registry is required to fix a problem, and then as soon as you touch it, you've now broken everything. Don't ever do that. Always make a backup. There's a little backup feature built into the registry. There's an option in regedit that allows you to take a section of the registry and save it off to a file. That way, if you need to recover it, all you have to do is really run that registry file, and it rebuilds the registry from that backup. It's so easy to recover from a problem with the registry if you already have a backup. So make sure you have a backup. I've run into the registry problems I've run into are many and varied. Some of the worst ones I ran into were the registry not having the right permissions, and my system would take 2 minutes to boot. It would get to a certain part of the boot process, and it would stop for 2 minutes. It would just sit there, and then 2 minutes later, it was suddenly fine. It went back to working. It was perfectly normal and fast, and it was just these 2-minute delay where nothing was happening. And it turns out there was a section of my registry that I, for some reason, did not have access to on my own computer. Something had gotten corrupted or was put in wrong or was changed so that I didn't have permissions to write to my own registry. So all I did was change the permissions, like give me rights to the registry, to that section of the registry, rebooted, up and running in seconds. Sometimes these are the things that happen. So be familiar with regedit, but be very careful when using regedit. You could break things really, really easily. The questions we went through today all came from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you have a copy of these objectives. You can find a link over to the CompTIA website by going to professormesser.com/objectives. I also can tell you can find them very easily by going to your favorite search engine and typing CompTIA exam objectives. It'll be the first thing that you run into. I see, as I expected, by the way, for those of you in the chat room, I can see that we did have a dip in our internet access. Thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for being back here with us. By the way, we do, in fact, I'll show you up on the screen. See the dip? So that was the outage, and it went back up to 3%. So we're back up and running again. Thanks for hanging out and being in there. Make sure you get your hands on these objectives. They are very valuable. They can tell you a lot about what will be on your exam. Pretty important. Very, very useful. Very important to have those. So that's important. Also keep in mind, we have these study groups every month. I have 2 A+ study groups every month. The next one is on August the 2nd and August the 4th. I also have a Network Plus study group on the 17th and the 24th. We skip a week here in August. You know, that's the chaos that is my life. So that's okay. We'll make it through in August from the 8th to the 12th. I got a week off, I guess. Not really, but you won't see me. You'll see me on the 17th and the 24th. So we got A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. But these times can change. These dates can change. The things get changed all the time. If you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, you can go to professormesser.com/calendar, and it will show you what that happens to be. Stick around, although the primary main part of our study group is over, where I ask you questions. I would say probably the more fun part is next, where you ask me questions in the after show. Don't forget about our course notes, our exam hacks ebook that's included with our vouchers, or also following us on Twitter. If you like this video, we'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up right now. Just go click the like button, thumbs up, whatever YouTube's using these days, right? Put that in there. We'll be able to get to that view. Thanks for being with us in this first hour. Stick around. We're coming back in just a couple of moments, and we'll take your questions in the after show. We'll see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, let's shift this around. Let's click a thing. Let's make that happen. Let's get rid of that graphic. Let's change our lower thirds. We're shifting gears, everybody. We're heading back over to after show mode, which means that you can ask me a question in the chat room that is located on my website at professormesser.com/live, or if you are on YouTube, it's the YouTube chat. It's the same chat. It's both places. I just embed the YouTube chat on my website so that we can ask any questions that might be there. So lots to go through. Well, it has been a busy couple of months. It is, whenever a new course comes out, it is a constant churning. There's just content that has to be built, books that have to be written, videos that have to be shot. It's all so intense, if you will. From the moment I wake up till the moment I go to bed, we're just doing that constantly, which is great. But I don't know that everybody's aware that we get everything out there, and now it's just there. So you can always go to my YouTube channel, professormesser.com/YouTube. There are playlists that are there already available. So everything is there and set up and configured. So that's the important part. So if you need anything relating to the 220.1101 or 220.1102, all the videos are available. And of course, course notes are available as well. There is more coming, though. You may notice there's no practice exams yet. Where's the practice exams? I have to write them. So that's what's next on my list. We're currently working on those. Practice exams will be coming out shortly. Probably not shortly. Over the coming weeks, we hope to provide you with some practice exams. That could technically be months, couldn't it? I think that's broad enough. But whenever they're done, and they tend to get done relatively quickly because I just stay on them to get those done. We'll have practice exams there too. Here's J-Star saying, I'm studying for the 1101. I'm getting hung up on pin counts of memory. Are things like that detailed on the test I need to focus on pin count numbers? Well, pin counts aren't listed in the CompTIA exam objective, so I would have no idea why you would study such a thing. Nobody cares what pin counts are of memory. We don't. As long as the motherboard says you should be using DDR4 and you have DDR4, then you got the right memory. How many pins is there? Nobody cares. It's a standard. DDR4 is what you need. So get the objectives. It will tell you if you need to study these things or not. I constantly go back to that. I've seen people, they've come to my site and they've said, hey, I've got this page. I've got 2 pages of 150 port numbers, and I'm really having a problem memorizing all of them. I thought, well, sure. Yeah, well, I guess so. I guess you are, because that's a lot of port numbers. You know, on the exam objectives, there's like 20. You don't have to know 150. So stick to the objectives. It will tell you exactly what you need to know, and perhaps even more importantly, what you don't need to know. There's a whole world of things out there that you can learn, but if it's not on the exam, you could probably wait until you're done to learn those things. Now, pin counts can be important. What if you're working for a company that manufactures memory? Okay, well, pin counts is probably important, but it's not on the exam, so you don't need to know it for the exam. I'm not saying these things aren't important. I'm just saying they're not important for the exam. That's the big difference. And that's why I think you should always find the right thing to study. Make sure the objectives are there. It is very common when people take an exam and they give an exam report on Reddit or other places, they will sometimes say, I spent a lot of time studying pin counts and I didn't get one pin count question. I know, because pin counts are not on the exam objectives. It's almost like saying I studied a lot about zebras and zebras weren't on the exam. Why'd you study zebras? Well, I like zebras, and someone told me the zebras were important, and I just studied zebras for a lot of it. But I didn't get any zebra questions. Wonder why that was. Well, zebras aren't on the exam objectives. But although now that I think about it, I think we should get zebras put onto the exam objectives. That would be a lot of fun. Probably a little out of scope, isn't it? Yeah, probably won't work out. But that's one of those situations where stick to the objectives. What I have found, traditionally, what we have seen, is that the questions on the exam tend to stick to the objectives very closely, almost exclusively. You might get a question or two that are not on the exam objectives. And sometimes those questions they ask you that are not on the exam objectives are questions they aren't actually grading. It's more of an experiment to see, is this something that people are answering right or wrong? Should we include this topic on a future exam? I don't know why they ask these things. I'm guessing. I'm speculating. But those are very useful. Those exam objectives, very useful to keep you focused, to keep you exactly between the lines, to know exactly what you need to know for your exam. And I will tell you, I'll just say this. If you know everything that is listed in the exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam. That's how close they stick to those objectives. If you know everything in the list of exam objectives, you will pass your exam. There's just no question in my mind that it's a gimme. If you can take that exam objective and explain to someone else, this bullet means this, and here's how you would use it and when this would be seen, and et cetera, et cetera. So pretty important. Question in the chat room. Benny says, is it possible to skip help desk and go straight to system admin? Well, first, why would you do that and give up a year of working with end users? Gosh, why would you want to skip that experience? That sounds ridiculous. But, you know, if you really want to skip that part and go straight to system admin, there are opportunities to do that. I will give you the other side of the coin. Is my first job was a field service technician job, and I got promoted into a help desk position. So sometimes you even start, I don't want to say lower than the help desk, but it was much lower than the help desk. It was lower than the help. I worked up to the help desk, and then from the help desk went into workstation administration, then server administration, then network administration, then cybersecurity. So that's where it just depends. You could run into an environment, maybe you're working for a smaller company where a help desk isn't required. Maybe the only thing they have is you're not only the help desk, but you're also the system administrator. That certainly happens. But I would say for the most part, for most places, the help desk is your first way in the door. So don't discount the value of getting your foot in the door. And if your foot in the door is with the help desk, embrace it. The help desk is a great place to hang out and literally watch the world go by, because you are interacting with the workstation team, with the server team, with the security team, with the network team, with the database team, with the email team, with the cloud team, et cetera, et cetera. So you get to meet everybody. You get to understand what their jobs are like. You get to understand their responsibilities. And after you're there 6 months, some of those will have an interest in you. You might say, oh, I really like the Linux team. I like their vibe. I like what they do. I'm interested in Linux. I'm going to let them know that if a job opens up, I'd love to put my resume in. Or maybe you're doing that and think, man, the networking team, they're working at the packets. They've got routers and switches. They're doing the administration. They're building out this wide area network. They're connecting us to the cloud. They manage the VPNs. That's what I want to do. I want to go and work with the network team. So you get a chance at the help desk to be a sponge and really start to understand what different parts of the organization are doing. And you're almost... it's almost a sort of a view in. You can kind of, oh, what are they doing? What's that server team doing over there with the new stuff they're working on? And also, if you ever get into a situation where they have to build out a new call center, they have to build out a new training room, and they need warm bodies, they need people to unpack boxes or to mount stuff in a rack, volunteer, maybe on a Friday, Saturday night, a Sunday morning, or whatever it is, volunteer for that. Say, oh, you need a warm body? Let me know. I'd be glad to come in and help you unbox these things. Any chance you can get to network with those, not computer network, people network with those folks is very, very valuable. And you'll find the more interest you show in the technologies, the more interest they will show in you. So it's a great way to level up. I always talk about leveling up in IT, and that's a great way to level up. It's sort of the way it happened for me. In the job I had in the help desk, I leveled up to the team doing workstation and server administration. It was sort of a combined effort there. So I went from being someone who was kind of service desk to someone who is more of administration and Windows admin and working on the network. It was a kind of a combination type of job. But that was perfect because I knew those folks. I talked to them over time. That was such an important jump. I look back in my career, and it was so early on. I'd finished college. Right out of college, I got a job working as that field service tech. I worked in the computing center with mainframes and supercomputers prior to that. But once I got out of college, I got that job as field service and then got the job as help desk. And it was that next jump from help desk to this particular department that handled workstations and servers that really changed my direction, my career direction. because it allowed me now access to work with the operating system, to have these projects I were working on were a much larger scale. You go from and a help desk, your project is the phone call that you're on at that moment. It's the tickets you're working on or your projects. But when you start working for a group like that, the projects are much broader. And they say, well, we're opening up 2 remote sites this year. We need to plan the wide area network connections for those sites. We need to determine how we're going to connect those locations. We need to set up some VPN connectivity to those sites. And then we need to make sure our applications are going to work properly over that slower bandwidth. All right, well, there's a whole set of things now we need to test. And now your day-to-day that was normally working this ticket has now turned into a multi-month, in some cases multi-year project where there are many steps and many parts of the process and many people involved and many parts of the organization are involved. It's a different scope that gives you ability to learn different things. So there are jobs out there, to answer your question, Benny. There are absolutely jobs that will allow you to jump past the help desk and go straight to system admin. But don't discount the value of working at the help desk because it gives you a chance to really figure out, what do I want to do next? This is the question you always hear about in an interview that is, to me, kind of funny because I've been in IT for quite some time. But the question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or where do you see yourself in 10 years? And the part that's funny to me is that technology in 5 years from now could be completely different. There could be new technologies appearing in 5 years that we've never worked with before, that take the world by storm, that are changing the way we think about technology. I mean, go back 10 years and how much cloud was around 10 years ago compared to now? How much cryptocurrency, how much blockchain was around 10 years ago versus now? It was a very different emphasis in those particular technologies. So now we sit here 10 years from now, could you even have predicted that? Of course not. You'd be a billionaire because you'd have all the Bitcoin. You can't predict where you will be in 10 years. And I think the best answer to that question for somebody who's in IT says, well, especially if it's somebody you're working with who's in IT, and you can say, well, you know as well as I do, in 5 years and 10 years, the world's going to be a different place. So I'm just hoping to hang on and to watch the emerging trends and to learn as much as I can about the new technologies and to keep the old stuff still working and integrating with those. That's the best we can hope for, because in IT, we're just sort of holding on as tight as we can as the technology is pulling us along, and it's a constant process of learning. So I hope to still be learning in 5 or 10 years. There's my answer. There's my interview answer was right there. That's the one I would use if somebody asked me that. I think I get where you're coming from, Benny, that many people look at the help desk as a burden. They look at it as something that's painful. And from a salary perspective, you may be correct. Starting an entry-level position gives you an entry-level salary. And if you want to look at it that way, that's very motivating, because you don't want to be at that entry-level salary for very long. You want to be able to level up. And when you level up in IT, it's not just leveling up to do different things. It's also leveling up to make more money. And that's the plus and minus. We can have plenty of conversations about why is the salary important? Why is there an emphasis on how much money you make in IT? And maybe there isn't. We had this conversation in the last study group. You get to make that determination. In my career, there was some balance, but it was really about how can I make the most amount of cash in the least amount of time, but still maintain my sanity, and my family life and the things that would normally work. And it worked out. I was able to figure that out. But as I mentioned before, the main part of my career was working as a systems engineer, where I would travel constantly throughout the week. So I'd leave home on a Monday, I'd come back on a Friday. That was a very common week for me. And so there's a different vibe. There's a different plan. You get to be there's a teamwork that takes place when you're married, where you figure out the right balance and then you kind of play off each other's strengths. And that particular setup worked very well. Now, though, I can just sit here and talk to you. I don't have to travel around anymore. I can do this now. A lot of what we used to do remotely is now just available, or what we used to do in person is now available remotely. So it's so much easier to do that. I think that's a really important way to look at it. Other questions. I'll take this one because this is a good one that we can use as a jumping off for other topics as well, which is the chat room. Hey, have you heard good things about the Coding Dojo CS Bootcamp? Oh, that made me, it's just bad. Anything dealing with computer science just it's not my vibe. I can't do programming. I'm not a programmer. I don't build applications. I don't have an interest in building applications, at least not anymore. It's not something I enjoy, and I'm an IT guy. I've spent my entire career in information technology, and as many of you know, computer science is not information technology, and information technology is not computer science. There's very little overlap between those two, and if you are doing computer science and you're a programmer or a hardware developer or you're building apps or you're doing that, that's fantastic. Keep doing that. That's pretty important, but computer science. So in this case, though, thankfully, not computer science, all about cybersecurity. But my answer that I'm about to give you applies to any boot camp. Whenever I see boot camp, this applies to that, especially, by the way, if it's cybersecurity. In some cases, sort of computer science. Computer science actually might work better in a boot camp environment, but still not as well as I would hope. And it would also depend on what you mean by boot camp. Generally speaking, the term boot camp in our industry, whether it's computer science or IT, has traditionally meant going to a class that is lots of hours in the day that you would go to in a week, like a week long, sometimes 2 weeks long, but certainly no more than 2 weeks. A boot camp is the idea that you're going in and they are running you ragged for the entire time that you are there, but you're there for a short period of time. In the world of IT, that model quite simply does not work. There's no possible way. Let's take Security Plus for an example. There's no possible way to fit everything you need to know to pass the Security Plus exam into a 5-day boot camp, even if your days are 12 hours long. There's no possible way to do something like that. Now, what has happened in the industry is people have recognized that the term boot camp, as ill-advised as it may be to go try to learn something in a week, is they've realized the term is very marketable. And so now almost everything is a boot camp, regardless of how long it takes. They sort of just use the term boot camp because it gets people's eyes, it gets people's interest. And in this particular case, the question is about a 24-week boot camp. That's not a boot camp. 24 weeks is not a boot camp. That's a class. You're taking a class. It's a semester. It's 2 semesters. You're taking a long-term course for this. So that is not, I would argue, I would respectfully disagree with using the term boot camp to describe a 24-week class. So, but if we had to at least say, is that a good idea or not? That's ideal. Being able to learn these topics over a long period of time, or at least in a properly timed amount of duration, is pretty important. You have so much that is involved with just Security Plus or Network Plus or A Plus. Can you imagine doing A Plus in a week, both exams? No, of course not. 24 weeks, yeah, we can do that. Yes, that makes sense. But that's, almost a year. You got 8 months there of taking the boot camp. 8 months is not a boot camp, but sure sounds good, doesn't it? It meant boot camp. That's one that I think makes sense. And if somebody was studying for anything, that's plenty of time to study for any of these courses. 24 weeks, that's great. fact, it's kind of unusual to see one that's that long. I suspect, you didn't say, but I suspect that's probably some type of existing place of learning, a university, a college, or something like that. Because that's what it sounds like. A private training company, that's not usually their model. Private training or corporate training tends to be that 1 week or 2 week model where they get you in, they shove as much as they can in your brain, and off you go. And for some topics, that works fine. I've gone to week-long or 3 or 4 day courses on certain technologies, on Windows Server. I've taken a week-long, they didn't call them boot camps back then because we didn't, because it wasn't, and it isn't. But it was a 5-day course. Or I've taken 5-day courses on certain networking technologies. Well, that makes sense because you can kind of cram in as much as you need to learn in that 5-day period so that you're covered to be able to support that particular networking technology. There's no certification exam on the end of it. It's really just to teach you a skill, and then you're done. But for certifications, you need at least a month or two for some of these. It would make sense. It just refers to that. Yeah, and you see the term, their chat room's right. You see this term boot camp used everywhere. Colleges are using it. Universities are using it. Third parties, they're just using it for everything. Everything's a boot camp now. So now that everything's a boot camp, nothing's a boot camp, as it turns out. That's just a way to get your attention. And it's not a scam. They aren't, you can't say, well, they use the term boot camp, so this must not be legitimate. No, it could be legitimate. They're just using it as a marketing term to kind of get your interest, kind of catch your eye, bring you in, and have you be part of that particular course. The ones that are, I don't want to use the term scam because that tends to have a connotation associated with it, but it's rather ill-advised to take a 1 or 2 week course of any kind to prepare for a certification exam. There's simply not enough time in the day. My argument is if you don't know anything and you're walking into this 1 week course to learn everything, there's no possible way to do that. It's a physics problem. It's a time motion study issue. You can't do that. There's not enough time in the day. Even if you spent 24 hours a day during that 5-day period, you still would not be able to get all of the information you need to pass that certification. So that doesn't do you any good if you know nothing. All right, well, what if you go into the boot camp for this 1 week and you've done some studying? You've watched the videos, you got the course notes, you went through some practice exams, you did some labs, you got some familiarity with the topics and the abbreviations and the nomenclature and all of the things associated with this. Then you go to the course. Now you can understand it better and maybe it works better for you. Well, the problem, of course, with that is, first, what you know doesn't change the structure of the course because you're in a course with a bunch of other people. The structure of the course is already defined. What you learn in a single day has already been defined. Whether you know it or not, it's going to go at the same slow pace that it was designed to go from the very beginning because the other people in the room, they didn't spend time watching the videos, reading the books, doing the labs. They know nothing. So we have to slow down for everybody else to be able to keep up. The other part about this that is rather ridiculous is now that you've gone into this, you spent time studying and reading the book and watching the videos and doing the labs and going through the practice exams, you probably don't need the course anymore. You don't need the boot camp. You've already done all the hard work. You've effectively done the studying that you were going to do during that boot camp process. So that's the part to me that a 1 week boot camp has practically zero value for the person who's fresh and brand new getting into it. It also has practically zero value for somebody who's knowledgeable. So you don't need it either way. That's my argument. There's holes in the argument. There are corner cases to this argument. Absolutely. And nothing is black and white. There's always a gray area associated with that. But I would say for the vast majority of people taking a boot camp, why would you do that? Why would you go through that? It doesn't make sense to me. So like other people are saying, yep, I took a 3-month training program. Benny says, took 3 months for Network Plus. That was a boot camp. Yeah, 3 months. Okay. I mean, we can call it a boot camp, but 3 months, 3 months that's that's not a boot camp. You've effectively moved in. You're there. You're living there now. It's more than an overnight. You're not crashing on the couch. You're there for 3 months. So it's not a boot camp. I know they called it a boot camp. So I guess you can call it anything you'd like. But that makes sense for those. Other questions. Heavy D. You're back again. So good to see you. We've missed you. The question from Heavy D says, planning on upgrading my hard drive from HDD hard drive to SSD. I'm guessing SSD, solid state drive. Good, fantastic, yay. We all should do this. We all should take our old hard drive systems and convert them to SSDs. But Heavy D says he has a very old motherboard. Well, I guess so. You probably had it for quite some time now that you're back. You have an old motherboard which are having problem upgrading MBR to GPT. Would installing an SSD enable to switch that way from a master boot record to the GUID type of file system, a file structure? The motherboard does not make that determination. The motherboard, well, that's not entirely true either, because you could have if it's a really old motherboard, that could be an issue. You're right. But it would seem unusual to have a motherboard so old that it would not be able to work with storage devices that way. The operating system tends to decide how to read information from the disk format, from the volume format. That's really an operating system issue. It's not really related to the motherboard. So I suspect there's something about the OS you're using that maybe has some type of problem converting, because you could convert from MBR to GPT if you wanted. It sounds like your conversion process isn't working right. But you could certainly do a migration from a hard drive to an SSD, where your migration changes from a volume that was set to be MBR to a volume that is now GPT. Absolutely, you could do that. In fact, if I was going to do an upgrade on my system from a hard drive to an SSD, I would probably image it, but I would image it to another volume type. I would image it from whatever I was running on the old, like the master boot record format. I would image it to a new volume that was GPT, and that would really solve your problem. Plus, whenever you do an image like that, you copy it from one drive to another, you're effectively making a backup. So if something goes wrong with the conversion, you've still got your old hard drive that you could just replace, and now you're back up and running again. I think that would be the best bet. And of course, check your motherboard manufacturer that you have the latest BIOS update, that it understands the differences in all of these, that can find this information on a drive. But normally it's the operating system that makes that determination. Joel in the chat room questions. The question is, I'm currently looking at 2 different degree programs. I'm curious as to where these degree programs are being offered. One being Cisco Heavy. Well, we just talked to Heavy D, so this is Cisco Heavy. I don't know if there's a comparison there to make. And the other being CompTIA. What would your recommendation be as far as marketability? Okay, this is WGU, Western Governors University, which is very, very popular, this WGU idea. They've taken the idea of technology training and used it with an emphasis in certification. So you're effectively taking classes that is going to move you or earn you at the end of it the knowledge necessary to take a certification exam and have that certification in your pocket, which is a great idea. And Western Governors is a group of universities. These are well-established, well-known universities working together under the name Western Governors. So this is not a fly-by-night or somebody out of left field that showed up and said, we can teach you something about the computer. No, these are people that are trained to teach, and it's organizations that have been doing universities and colleges for quite some time. So that's one of the other benefits of WGU. I've never worked with WGU. I know nothing about WGU other than what other people who have gone to WGU have told me. So this is from what I can see. This is the things that I work through there. But your question was a good one, which is there are different areas of emphasis that you could choose, very much like going to any particular college. Do you want to do Linux? Do you want to do security? Do you want to do CompTIA, A plus Network plus Security plus? There's different areas to go into. And the areas that you would want to focus on that are marketable are the ones that employers will want to hire you on. Now, this will probably have a strong determination based on your geography. So where you live will help determine what employers in your area are looking for. I'll give you an example. So if you live in DC or an area that's near Washington, DC, on the East Coast of the United States, so you live in Maryland, you live in Virginia, or anything in that DC area that has sort of a connection to the federal government, many of the IT, almost all of the IT jobs in that area, at a bare minimum, require you to have Network Plus or a similar certification. For many people, it's Security Plus or something general to that. And for most people, it's Security Plus. That means that if you are going to jump into one of those jobs, that's going to be a minimum. You have to have Security Plus. So for anything else, everything else waits until I get my Security Plus in my pocket. And most of the jobs you run into in that area say that Security Plus is required. And there's probably other requirements that go along with that as well. But let's say that you are in Miami and you look through jobs there, and you may find that the emphasis in Security Plus is very different. In fact, you may not find many jobs relative to DC where Security Plus is even mentioned. But maybe you see a lot of jobs that they're asking for CCNA, Cisco related connections. Maybe there's a lot of networking there. Maybe there's jobs at the NAP in Miami, or an organization that has locations in Latin America and they do a lot of wide area networking. Or it's a company that is a national conglomerate and they have remote sites all over the country and they're based in Miami. Those are things you find all the time. So there's a huge networking component. They might want more networking knowledge. It just depends on where you are and what people are looking for. There's a link in the video description of this video of how to get a job in IT with no experience. And it's a 30-minute video. I know it's long, but it had to be that long. It is chock full of topics, ideas, suggestions, and things you should do, strategies you should follow to determine what type of jobs are available in your area and perhaps where you might want to consider getting more knowledge or more certifications. So I would highly recommend having a look at that video. I think that if you ever get into trying to determine where do I go, where are people hiring? In fact, I see this a lot online. People ask, what certification should I do next? And people will give all of their opinions. Oh, you should do this. You should do the CompTIA Network Plus. No, you should do Network Plus. You should do CCNA. No, you shouldn't do CCNA. You should do Security Plus. No, you should do Security Plus. You should do Cloud. And everybody gives their opinion on what they think the most important thing is. But what nobody ever does is they never ask you, what are employers in your area looking for? Because I think that should be part of your decision-making process. And if you start looking at the jobs in your area and every single job wants you to have networking knowledge or Cisco CCNA, well, there you go. Go get a CCNA. Or maybe the bulk of the jobs is looking for Security Plus. Well, you should go get Security Plus. Nobody else can make this decision for you. No, unless they sit down with you and really have a one-on-one and have a conversation about what you want to do, what's happening in your area, where do you live, what are you interested in, what technologies appeal to you, what type of organizations are important to you. That might be important. Some people may not want to work for the federal government. Some people might want to work for a corporation or vice versa. So there's differences between these organizations. You should also consider that as well. So I can't give you the answer to, oh, do I go into CCNA or do I go into more CompTIA stuff? Well, it depends. The great part about IT, though, is it's very, very difficult to make a bad decision at that level because there are jobs everywhere for these different skill sets. There's jobs for CCNA. There's jobs for people that have Network Plus and Security Plus and A Plus. There's jobs for cloud certifications. There's jobs for people that have Microsoft certifications. There's just tons of jobs. And what you find in your career, and this is especially true in IT, what you're doing right now will be very different than what you're doing 5 or 10 years from now. Very different. And another great part of this is that if you start working with, maybe you make a decision, I want to focus on Linux, and you start working with Linux, you become a Linux administrator, you're really getting into it, you've learned everything you could learn about that operating system, you've done tons of troubleshooting on Linux, you've built out a year or two of experience in that operating system, and you've put a lot of time and effort and knowledge into it, you've studied as much as you can, and you've become really good at managing Linux, and then you realize, this is not what I really want to do. I really want to do something with networking. Well, this is the beauty of IT. Go do that. You've got now such a strong background in Linux and the way Linux operates. Of course, you should now start working on the other side, working with the networking stuff. It's easy to transition over because similar people in your organization. Every organization has a Linux group and a networking group and a Windows group and a cloud group. And we have all of these different people doing all of these different jobs. And there's different new positions opening all the time, that transitioning into that line tends to be much easier. It's more of a concentric diversification, if you will, into that. And so it's very easy to move over into that piece. I'm a perfect example of this, where I started more on the hardware side, then worked more on the workstation side, desktop operating system side, then moved into the server operating system side with the server hardware, then moved into the networking packet gathering side of things, and then eventually used all of that knowledge to leverage that into a cybersecurity role. So that was a very long path. I just sort of described it in 15 seconds. That was years in the making to go from one to the other to the other. I think if anyone is getting into this, bear with me a moment here. I think if anybody is ever getting into IT and thinking for any moment that they're going to be doing this for the rest of their life, that is not correct at all. The world of IT it's almost like an earthquake every day. The entire infrastructure under your feet is constantly in motion. The world is constantly shaking under your feet, and things are changing all the time. Some people even think, and either this makes them very happy or very sad. And I tell people, well, you're going to get this certification, and you're going to learn these skills, and you're going to get a job based on the things that you know, but you're still going to be studying for the rest of your career. Because when I started in this industry, there was no internet. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There was no PC-based virtualization. There was no cloud-based technologies. None of this existed. So in that period of time, you had to keep studying. You had to constantly stay up to date. And usually the projects you're working on are giving you the study as you go. But this is the real key in IT, is that it never ends. You're always having to learn something new. And in a way, that's a real benefit, because no one person ever knows everything. It's impossible. You will never know everything. The people you work with will never know everything. In fact, the best places I have ever worked is where we all had sort of a foundational knowledge, but certain people in the group had a specialty. So if I was working to build out a proposed firewall design, and this particular company wanted BGP, I've never implemented a BGP from scratch. I've always supported BGP once it was already created. So I knew the background of BGP. I knew how BGP worked. I could configure it on a router. I got that part of it. But I had specific questions about the planning process and some of the issues around advertising and connectivity with BGP. So I needed to talk to somebody who's built BGP from the ground up. No problem. I had a guy on my team. He did it all day, every day at an MSP. So I just called him, said, hey, am I thinking the right way here? Can we just do it like this? He goes, change this to what's here, and now you got it. So having someone to rely on that had a specialty in that particular area, that particular knowledge was incredibly valuable. And I would highly recommend to anyone in IT, one of the best ways to really make yourself valuable in this industry is to find one of those areas, maybe it's Linux or Windows or cloud or whatever it happens to be, and find a niche that is not being served by the bulk of people that you see in this industry. Maybe this is something that happens to you naturally. Maybe your particular company you work for is maybe you work for a power company. Like your job, your role is to make sure that electricity flows to all of your customers. You're in IT, but that's ultimately the goal of your organization. And your goal is to support that effort with all of your information technology infrastructure. So that's a very specific niche. And if at that point you start really learning the ins and outs of that niche, you would be able to apply that knowledge probably to certainly other organizations that are doing power, but you can also maybe even leverage that into organizations that have a lot of SCADA or industrial equipment that needs to be networked because it's a similar type of networking. So having that niche knowledge now increases your value and ostensibly increases your salary. So that would be really the way to go, is find that niche. For me, the niche turned out to be packets. It turned out to be not just networking, but knowing and understanding what was happening on the network based on the protocol decodes. And I spent years of my life working at the protocol level on a network, on many networks. But that is a good example of how that level of knowledge of how applications communicated, of how IP communicated, TCP, UDP, and then how to troubleshoot applications communicating over those links, regardless of the topology, became very valuable. Valuable enough I was able to leverage that into a cybersecurity role. So that's what you should be thinking about, is that it's more than just learning Windows. It's more than just learning the network. There's an aspect of those technologies that is niche that you can really become an expert in your field, a de facto expert in your field, because you're the one who spent the most amount of time learning that technology. And there will be other people in your field that are also experts in this that you'll be able to work with and leverage and call and communicate with. But I think that's something that we often forget about, is that what you do today, what you choose, you'll go to WGU and you'll choose Cisco or you'll choose CompTIA, but none of this is a final answer. None of this is the final thing that you will do. It's just what you're doing right now. And that's my follow-up to, they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? The real question is, where do you see yourself next? Because that could be a number of different things in IT. This is what we have an advantage in IT beyond the scope that we see in other vertical type jobs. Let's say you got a job working in healthcare. Well, you're probably going to get a job working in nursing, working as in the OR, working in some type of healthcare field. Maybe that's what your job is. There's only so many things you can do to move up in the organization, and they're usually focused on the thing that you're doing then. Because if you spent your time becoming an expert in podiatry, then shifting gears and becoming now an expert in heart surgery, that doesn't happen. You've already spent years learning the podiatry part of this. That's what you're going to do for the rest of your career, unless you decide to throw it all away and kind of start over again. So that's one of the things, we don't have to deal with that in IT. In IT, it all builds on each other. And we can simply keep leveling up and leveling up and leveling up, and we can completely change our careers and what we're doing and how we're doing it just by changing our focus on what we want to do. That's something you really don't have an option in other fields. Whatever it happens to be, transportation, manufacturing, healthcare, finance, none of those have that level of flexibility. IT is really the only one that does. And that's what gets me excited about the entire field. It's one of the big reasons we do this. It's one of the big reasons we do these live streams. We create these training materials. I would not be encouraging people to get into this line of work if I didn't believe that it was a significant game changer. Well, I not only believe it's a significant game changer, IT changed my life. It changed my career. It provided me with things I never thought I would have access to. Other people can do this too, and they should. And if they have any interest in technology, it's an amazing career with not only fun things to do and amazing things to learn. And if you're somebody who likes to solve problems, you're in the right place. But it also is one that it also gives you a nice salary. And that's something that's a great 1-2 punch. That's a fantastic combo in my mind. And why wouldn't you do that? It's kind of a long answer to should I go Cisco or should I go CompTIA? But that's my philosophy on that particular answer. You'll notice I didn't actually answer the question, which is pretty normal for me. I didn't actually give you a direction. All I basically said is the answer is inside of you. The future is what you make of it. I could give you the flowery type response. The man who walks down the path today is a different man who walks down the path tomorrow. I don't know. Whatever, that's sort of the idea behind this. And I get it's sort of a high level communication on that. But, that's the idea. That is the focus, is that there's plenty of directions to go. It's very difficult to make a bad decision. And I'll tell you, I've made some bad decisions in my career with changing jobs. I've been in one job and I'm like, oh, I'm taking this new job. And I get in the new job and realize this was an awful, awful mistake. This happens. I have made a bad decision. Now, even when I make bad decisions in my career, there's still things I learned. So it wasn't a complete loss. It wasn't a total loss. But when you make those bad decisions, it's not a deal breaker. You're not stuck. All you do is look around for another job. So then, boom, you go to the next one. And in my career was very much Star Trek movie career. In that, every other one of the jobs I got was good, and every other one of the jobs I got was very bad. So I go from good job to not a great job, to good job, to really not a great job, to good job. So every other one tend to be a hit. But those movies right in the middle, not so great. Voyage Home, really? Okay, I guess we could have a conversation. We could go through the Search for Spock. I don't know. There was always the pluses and minuses, right? And yes, and you will never be a red shirt in IT. There's always a place to go. You'll always get off the planet. You can get to another planet. We're taking this whole idea of Star Trek a little bit too far, I think. But you know what I'm saying, is that you have options, and that's the real benefit. I did not think when I started my career that I would be in networking down at the packet level. In fact, I didn't even understand there was a packet level when I started my career. That's how bad this was. I think back to the days of working in operations at college in a computing center with the supercomputers and the mainframes and things we were doing. But I didn't understand there were packets, that there was the data transfer method. I didn't understand what was going on at the wire level. And how could I? I didn't know. I just thought it was a part-time job I had in college that I could work on the weekends that was air-conditioned. I loved it. I thought, and I could study. It's fantastic. So that's when I look at my career, I'm like, okay, I started discovering these new things, like the operating system side, then the packets themselves, and looking at communication over the network and understanding. It's almost like you became an expert in reading this stuff that was just flowing down the screen. It's like the Matrix. Like, it's just a green, funny characters going down the screen until you know what it's saying. And then suddenly you can tell people, oh, well, looking at this, we can see that the server is the issue. Or looking at this, we can see the problem is the configuration of the user's workstation. There's so many things we can pick out just by looking at the packets. The packets say everything. The packets are the final determination on what's really going on. And if you can read those and understand them, you suddenly become very knowledgeable and what's happening over the network with the applications, with the servers, with the workstations. You see it all. Very powerful. So I think that's one where you can go from having no knowledge of this at all to becoming and having an expertise in that knowledge, even though you didn't even know that thing even existed when you started the path. But to me, that's just normal IT. That's what we've done through the years. That's the way it works. You're going to learn things 5 years from now you didn't even know existed, and yet there it is. In fact, now you have a career on it, whatever it happens to be. That's the real key. I'd like to hear from things in the chat room like King David, who says, passed your 1101 with my videos only. So we now have to question King David on how smart that is, but really can't question him too much because he passed. So I always tell people you should always diversify your study materials, have as many as you can, not just videos, not just books, not just labs, not just Q&A. But there are a number of people who just watch my videos and go take their exam and they pass it because I put every exam objective into the videos. And I'm certainly glad to hear, King David, of your 1101 pass. Congratulations. And already starting to study for your 1102. And well, you should, because now it's time to go get that cert. And the benefit, of course, is now you can study for the 1102 without pushing up against that October 20th date, which you were probably thinking along that line. Also, now we get more of the story from King David, who says, I had a lot of hardware experience, but not much software. So in many ways, that makes a lot of sense that the 1101 was so comfortable for you because you already had an existing knowledge base. And King David even says, I'm absolutely diversifying for 1102 because I don't have much on the software side. That's perfect. And that's exactly what you should do. So congratulations on the 1101 and best of luck with 1102. I think you'll find you'll be able to apply the same concepts, ideas on the hardware side. We'll just apply them to Windows. And if very possible, make sure you get plenty of labs. I also have a link in my YouTube video description for the Microsoft website that has their VMs for Windows. Free VM for you to download. Fully blown workable version of Windows. Boom, there it is. Just fantastic. Make sure you get your hands on those. Valuable tools. And they're provided by Microsoft. You can't use them for your Windows desktop, but you use them in a lab type environment. Use them for your troubleshooting. Use them for testing. Use them for trying things out. It all works great. So you can get those from the modern.ie website, and the link is in my video description. So that's a freebie. So if you're somebody like me where Mac OS is your primary desktop and you really like to get more Windows hands-on, well, you can run in a VM and just load Windows on your Mac OS or Linux desktop, and now you're running Windows. And you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry you're going to break anything because it's a virtual machine. And if you break something, you just rewind it back to the earlier snapshot, and you're back to where you started. I think that works great. Let's see other questions in the chat room, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. Michelle in the chat room says, career change at 41. These are common stories that I hear where people are in a certain area. They've been working with a certain type of job, and then they decide, IT is much more interesting. IT is much more valuable. IT is much more lucrative, or whatever it happens to be, more flexible. Michelle says, absorbing all I can at whatever rate my mental capacity can handle for the time. Solidarity. Even taking A+ a second time to feel confident enough to take the exam. So I think this is not a bad idea. Trying to get as many different study materials as possible is a valuable thing. The way that, and perhaps even more importantly, having different study materials that are different types. So watch the videos. I'll just lead with that because that's an obvious self-promotion. Watch the videos. Those are great. Also get a book, because the book teaches you in a different way. It shows you things in a different way. It has a little more detail that you can't get out of a video, but the video has demonstrations and live descriptions of what you're seeing that you can't get from a book. So there's a good example of how those two work together to teach things in a different way. And I always tell you, get as much hands-on as possible. Doing these things at a command line and typing it in yourself and seeing the results of what you type in is, I don't know what happens in our brains. I don't know how all that stuff works. I'm an IT person, but there's just something about the way the synapses fire. It sort of locks in some of these concepts into your brain when you start typing it on the keyboard, seeing it on the screen, and those somehow work together to lock themselves into your brain somehow. So it's valuable to get some hands-on. And then, of course, I always say Q&A. Get plenty of labs. That's what I'm working on next, is to provide you with more Q&A books after you finish the labs. So I think that's another one that might help you, working through all of those. This is, and another thing to think about, we talked about this 2 days ago in the previous study group, is when you get to a certain part of your career, you've been working for years at a particular role, and perhaps you've also worked yourself up to a particular salary level. Transitioning over to IT generally means you're starting down at the bottom again, not only in your level, your job level, but also in your salary level. So there are financial challenges along with the technical challenges. And on top of that, you're walking into someone who's 41, and there could possibly be some interpersonal challenges with that. So I often tell people that are transitioning from a current type of role into IT is don't necessarily leave your old world behind. For example, if you worked for a transportation company, that transportation company has a lot of IT that they're doing. If you worked in healthcare, I guarantee you the hospital has a big old IT department. If you work in law enforcement these days is tons of IT. So there are ways to take things you know about and leverage them into a job in IT that could effectively fast track you up a little bit and perhaps justify a higher salary because you already have kind of this institutional knowledge of the particular segment of the world that you have previously worked in. So that could be valuable as well. Don't dismiss that. That doesn't always work out that way, I realize, but it may be a way to help. And also, you can think at this point in our career, once you've gotten into your 40s and you've been working in this, whatever industry you've been in for a while, you now have a network of people. You have a network of people that are other adults, friends, and family. You have other people that may be in groups that you work with, maybe at your church, or you have a community group you work with. There's people you know there. Or maybe you have been proactively going to user group meetings in your area for Cisco, for Microsoft, for cloud technologies, for Palo Alto networks, for whatever it is, and you've met people there. All of those people you know, you should be talking to about what they know of any IT jobs. Because they may not be an IT person, they may not know anything about IT, but they work at a Fortune 500 company and they know the IT people. So you can give them a resume that they can then give to the IT people, and it's coming from somebody in the organization that is trusted. Now, if someone in the organization will give the IT department that resume, you're already moved up the stack. They're not going to immediately throw that away because it came from somebody they know and they trust and works at the company already. And people love to work with people they know. They love to work with people they trust. And if somebody can vouch for you and say they're not living on the street, they're very good at being here on time, they're a hard worker, they learn fast, they've done amazing things in their career, they want to work in IT. If you got something, let them know. Those are like little stars you can put on your resume that they can say, yep, that's what you can do. That gives you a little heads up. It gives you a little bit more of a priority from other people that are just cold resumes coming off the street. Take advantage of those networks. If you do not have a LinkedIn account, if you've not built a profile yet, now's the time to do it. LinkedIn can be used in many different ways, and people tell me all the time they don't like LinkedIn. That's not their vibe. They are not a LinkedIn person. They don't want to play in the LinkedIn world. It's too sticky, sweet, and awful watching everybody pat themselves on the back. I get it. I don't use LinkedIn for that. Other people do, and that's fine for them. Knock yourself out. But LinkedIn is a great way to connect with all of these people that you know at a professional level. And having that connection provides you with a way to easily reach out to these folks and say, I just got my A+ certification. I'm looking for a position in the industry. If you see anything or have a lead, please let me know and we can chat. This may be something that you'll be able to leverage. And the only way you're going to be able to use LinkedIn that way is if you've already got it set up and you've already been building it. So LinkedIn doesn't happen overnight. You have to build these networks of people and have them in place so that you can then start pinging them. This is what we do once we start creating this profession. Why would you not take advantage of these friends and family and neighbors and professional compatriots who have worked with you side by side, who know you or know of you or know somebody that knows you and can trust you, and they have knowledge that you can now use. So I would highly recommend building out your LinkedIn profile if you have not done that already. So that's the real key. Now, it may be that you find that you're able to leverage this knowledge that you have, or, IT's big. Every organization has an IT company, part of the IT. You may be shifting into another line of work as time has gone on. Through my career, I've spent most of it in technology. I talked in the last study group that I started my career in the field, literally in agriculture, with a hoe in my hand, being driven out to the fields in the back of a truck every morning. That was one of the first jobs I ever had. That was the job that really taught me how much I enjoyed air conditioning. So that's why I think I ended up in IT, because you got to have air conditioning in IT. That aside, having this role in IT also allows you to move different places within these organizations. So if you'd rather be in management, some management positions in IT aren't very technical, but are heavy in management. So if you want to be in that management, project management, personnel management role, there's places in IT for that. If you're in finance, there's a huge financial aspect to IT, especially for these types of projects. So very often the CFO and the CFO's department, the central finance officer of an organization, will often have an arm of that or a directorship of that is in IT, because IT buys so much equipment. It's such an expense. They spend a lot of money on the cloud. So obviously there needs to be checks and balances on the financial side, and budgeting, and all of those things have to fall in place. So maybe finance is for you. For me, I have moved from a technical role. For a short period of time, I went into a management role, and I would argue I was probably an okay manager. It wasn't. When I got into it, I realized did not really enjoy this, and I went back to being technical again. I realized very quickly that not only is this not what I like, nobody likes me doing it, as it turns out. So we talked about moving from job to job, and every other job was good and every other job was bad. That was one of the bad ones. So quickly transitioned back into being technical, which was sort of like you fall back into a warm bed, you pull the cover and like, okay, this is perfect. Finally, I'm comfortable. That's what I felt when I moved out of a management role and went back into technical. But then I transitioned from there into more of a technical marketing role. So it was a little technical, but a lot more personable, a lot more talking to people, doing presentations, speaking with the press, being a company spokesperson, talking to analysts, giving some of that level. So it's not just being someone who can talk bits and bytes, but someone who can also convert the bits and bytes into the English language. So that was fun for a little while. And then an opportunity came up to move into cybersecurity, and I went with that one. And that was the last big job I got, was in cybersecurity, working as a systems engineer. It was highly technical. It was probably the most technical job I had in my career, probably by far. the most technical job because it was working with technology that was brand new. We talked about 5 years from now, what's suddenly going to be available. That was a really good example of me getting into a job at the very beginning of what turned out to be next generation firewalls. So I was able to become a de facto expert in the technical operation of a next generation firewall before anyone had a next generation firewall. So that kept me busy for 7 years. So that was a really good example, though, of how you can take this, something that's very different, a job role that's very different, and transition it into other jobs, but still remain in IT. So that might be another thing to think about is, and again, what you do today could be very different than what you do tomorrow. You just have to figure out what makes sense for you. Well, that brings us to the end, I think, of another set of questions, answers, and a lot of other things that we could talk about. But I think that covers us for this A+ study group. Thank you for being here in the first hour where I asked you the questions, and perhaps even more fun is just us hanging out in the second hour or second and a half hour and talking about really anything else. And we're always here to talk. You can always find us on Discord. We're hanging out usually on Discord doing something. There's always somebody in there asking questions about an exam, finding out or asking topics that come from the exam. It's a great place to follow up when we're not here live. Make sure you check our schedule. We'll be here next week on Wednesday for our Network Plus study group. A week after that is our Security Plus study group. You can always check the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Thanks for being here. We always love to do it. We can't do it without you. And we continue to thank you for your support. It is fantastic getting this new series out. You've embraced it and told us what the things that you're doing with it. People are already getting certifications from it. We love to hear it. Thank you for doing that and your ongoing support. We appreciate it. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everybody.